Chapter 571 to 0.01% possibility. Broken Water Arrow sent the message, yet he did not get a reply even after a while. He could already tell that the situation might not be in their favor. The players evacuated from the auction house almost instantaneously when the auction ended. Broken Water Arrow went against the flow of the crowd, squeezing his way to the auction panel and saw Yixiao standing there petrified, his eyes dully staring at the auction tab displayed. All of a sudden, the man turned around and looked all around, giving a swift gesture when he saw Broken Water Arrow beside him, indicating for him to step away from the crowd with him. "You didn't get it?" Broken Water Arrow asked as he rushed right up to Yixiao. The priest nodded with a dark expression shrouding his face. "Did something unexpected happen?" Broken Water Arrow asked. "There's no problem with my bid," Yixiao firmly said. He had already gotten a good grasp to the rule and tempo of the auction system. His bid had always been the one shown on the auction tab, and since he had not received the system's bid failed prompt even once, that was the best evidence that he had been successful in his bid every time, including that last time. "What happened, then?" Broken Water Arrow questioned. "There's only one possibility, and that during the final wave of bidding, someone increased the minimum bid. Increasing the minimum bid meant that someone keyed in a bid higher than what everyone had bid. In such a situation, time no longer mattered as the system would directly choose the highest bid, and the other bids keyed in would not be judged as a failed bid, since it would be like someone placing a higher bid for the auction. This was precisely why Yixiao was certain that the final bid had not failed but that the rug got pulled under him by being outbid. "That's really unlucky." Broken Water Arrow sighed. "This hasn't happened in all the previous refreshes, yet it happened in that final second before the auction ended. I find it hard to believe that it's all a coincidence," Yixiao refuted. "What else could it be?" "Nobody knows when the auctioned item would end," Broken Water Arrow said. "Someone knows," Yixiao replied. "Who?" "The seller." Broken Water Arrow suddenly realized that, indeed, the seller would know the end of the item's auction. "Yes, so it's possible that after she put it up for auction, but a friend of hers ended up wanting it, so she told this friend of hers the exact time and helped him or her successfully purchase the staff," Broken Water Arrow suggested. "What? By precisely timing the bid like this?" "If it's not intentional, would anyone even pay attention to the time when they first placed the item on auction?" Yixiao asked. "So, in other words, just what's going on here?" Broken Water Arrow was confused. "I have no clue." "Let's watch," Yixiao said even as he looked all around. At the moment, the auction house looked like a movie theater that was being emptied out after the show. The players were all heading off in every direction. Yixiao wanted to head over to the item pickup point to find out who had won the final bid for the magic staff, but there was already a horde of players gathered over there. Even though their emotions were not as complex as what Yixiao was feeling, it was hardly strange for them to be slightly curious as to the identity of this person. Flame-cinched clothes and glue were squeezing within this group, and they could not be more delighted with this situation. First, it made it difficult for them to be spotted in this crowd, and second, the player retrieving the magic staff would certainly be conspicuous appearing before everyone. If they had good luck, there was even a possibility that they could immediately inquire about the identity of this person straight from the crowd gathered. In the end, layer after layer of men watched with great anticipation, yet they saw no one come over to retrieve the item. Occasionally, a few players would draw the people present into excitement, but they were just once average players retrieving their purchases. None of the items they retrieved was the utopian magic staff. Instead, they did witness seeing the seller Vast Lushness appear, happily retrieving the big bag of gold coins she earned from the sale of her staff. "Where's this person? Why has no one appeared yet?" Flame-cinched clothes wondered. Everyone knew about the rule that an auctioned item could be held for safekeeping up to 7 days, but for a top-grade magic staff that had been so intensely contested before its acquisition, logic dictated that the buyer would hardly be able to contain himself or herself and collect the staff immediately, right? However, this person had yet to show up even now, causing everyone to feel very distressed. Dozens of minutes passed, and plenty of players no longer had the patience to wait and began to depart. Glue and flame-cinched clothes watched as the cover around them slowly shrank, their eyes darting about more and more frantically as this happened. "Where's Thousand Miles Drunk? Is he still around?" Flame-Cinched Clothes asked even as he keenly checked the surroundings. "I don't see him." Glue was also looking around. The number of players in the auction house reduced steadily, reaching the point where anyone would be able to take in the entire venue at a single glance. These two continued to keep a lookout, yet they never once caught a glimpse of Gouffé. The two were unable to continue watching the man's movement after he completed his sale of his Moonlit Nightfalls, since there was a bustling crowd in the way. Just like how Gouffé was unable to spot their presence, it was difficult for the two men to keep an eye on him. "Don't be negligent, Thousand Miles Drunk has shown his face here, so perhaps there are some unknown players watching our every move," Glue said. Flame-Cinched Clothes nodded, vigilantly gazing about when he noticed something in a certain direction. He quickly tugged at Glue. "Look over there, those two men look to be staring at us." Glue swiftly turned his head back for a look and was stunned. He recognized those two men to be Yixiao and Broken Water Arrow. Flame-Cinched Clothes had not met the two men before, but he was aware that they were the employers for their next big assignment. To be able to earn a tidy sum and vent their petty resentment to Thousand Miles Drunk, Flame-Cinched Clothes was of course absolutely in favor of this deal, so the moment Glue clued him in on their identities, he immediately waved to the two men eagerly. Yixiao and Broken Water Arrow also recognized Glue from afar and made their way over. Glue had originally thought to ask just what they were here for, but when he saw how Yixiao was still paying attention to where the NPC in charge of the auction picked up as he came forward, he instantly knew what their intentions were. "Bro, you didn't manage to get that magic staff?" Glue asked knowingly. Yixiao shook his head. "There are plenty of bidders. It all boiled down to luck," Glue consoled. "Perhaps it's luck or perhaps it's the seller herself buying it back," Yixiao replied. "What do you mean by that?" Both Flame-Cinched Clothes and Glue's complexion changed when they heard this. "Given my technique, there shouldn't be someone that would so coincidentally drop a bid higher than mine, unless the seller made the prior arrangement to take note of when the auction would end and was waiting for that very second to buy back the magic staff with an even increased bid," Yixiao explained. "Technique?" Glue and Flame-Cinched Clothes' concentration was momentarily distracted, for they were entirely unaware that there was such a thing as technique to auctions in Parallel World. Yixiao apparently had no wish to explain too much about this, so he continued to stare at the NPC in the distance. "I don't see the buyer all this while." Glue gingerly asked. "How likely do you think the seller herself buying the staff back?" 99.99%. Yixiao answered after a quick glance at Glue. "That's not 100%. Flame-Cinched Clothes remarked. "There's always a chance that it's merely a coincidence." There was no way to logically explain something like luck, anyway. Glue and Flame-Cinched Clothes did not neglect to pass quickly the unexpected information they had learned onto Southern Lone Blade. "Big South, we've met Fleeting Smile here, and he's certain, with a 99.99% possibility, that the Utopian magic staff has been bought back by the seller." "Oh, what's the basis for this assumption?" Southern Lone Blade hurriedly asked. "He didn't tell us in detail, but I don't think that he's making things up," Glue replied. "So, that means that this is really a trap?" Southern Lone Blade exclaimed. "But there isn't a trace of Thousand Miles Drunk or the others around," Glue reported. "Didn't they appear before? That just proves that they've been here. Surely, this is a trap." "Just leave," Southern Lone Blade said. "Should we stay on and look?" "Even if it's a trap, we gotta at least make sure that we know whose hands it ended up in," Glue said. "Since we've already confirmed this to be a trap, the staff will still end up in Vastlushness's hands." "We won't go wrong if we keep watch over that woman," Southern Lone Blade replied. "That makes sense. But the two of us will still wait around here for a bit to see just what kind of stunt they are trying to pull." "We're totally safe here, anyway," Glue insisted. "That's fine, too," Southern Lone Blade agreed. In order to more convincingly say that this was a trap, Glue asked Yixiao just how he was so certain that the sellers had bought the magic staff herself. Yixiao did not explain it in detail like what he did with Broken Water Arrow, merely elaborating on just how the successful and failed bids work when there were plenty of people. He further explained how his bidding had always been successful once he got a grasp of how this worked, up until the final bid before the auction ended, when he got buried by the highest bidder. That was the basis by which he found this single coincidence to be extremely suspicious. Hearing this, Gloomflame Singed Clothes judged that what Yixiao was saying was reliable. During that period when the auction was ending, no one bothered to increase the bid limit, yet that was exactly what had happened in the very last second. It was so outrageously coincidental that a 99.99% suspicion was hardly an exaggeration. Buying her auctioned item back, just what sort of result was she after? Yixiao mulled over. Gloomflame Singed Clothes glanced at each other, not saying a word. That 1,000 Miles Drunk ended up selling that sword of his, but he also got one of his comrades to buy it from him. What was that stunt all about, too? Broken Water Arrow was pondering over this matter as well. This was something neither Flame Singed Clothes nor Glue could make sense of either, so the four of them stood there with their wrinkled brows, contemplating over everything as best as they could. The two larcenists at least had half an idea about what was going, but what was the point of that stunt Gouffet had pulled with his moonlit nightfalls? The two nearly had a migraine just thinking about this. At this very moment, Gouffet and the others were long gone from the auction house. After Gouffet leapt up to that raised platform to auction his sword and began to draw everybody's attention over to him, Bluey's had brought all his men away from the premise. They should not have even been in the auction house to begin with, but the unexpected realization that they would be unable to get a spot anywhere near an auction panel had caused them to run over in their desperation. Once they saw that Gouffet's method was working, Bluey's swiftly called his men to leave the auction house, leaving just the priest who was in charge of making their final bid. Miles' method might have worked, but his participation in this charade has exposed us as a result. Southern Lone Blade and his men might have been in that crowd, and they might have already realized that this is a trap we've set when they saw him appear like that. Brother Assist worried over the matter. So very meddlesome. Young Master Han's displeasure was visible when he spat this with exasperation. But if he didn't do what he did, there's no way that we could get a spot at one of the auction panels. Brother Assist said. Why would that matter? Young Master Han asked. Stunned, Brother Assist came to an abrupt halt. Young Master Han turned back to look at the man, as Brother Assist slowly laid out. I've been wondering. You're someone who doesn't let even the tiniest detail slip past your eyes. Why would you be so careless like everyone else to actually overlook that there'd be a sea of players gathered at the auction house that time? Of course, it's because I knew that that would happen. So, you really wanted the charade to become reality. You actually wanted to use Vast Lushness's magic staff as bait to lure Southern Lone Blade out of hiding. Southern Lone Blade isn't a fool. This is the only way that he'll fall for it hook, line, and sinker, young Master Han replied. Chapter 572, I've long since wanted to beat you up. The plan could still be considered as quite a success, Bluey's said when he walked up to young Master Han and Brother Assist. One of his underlings was tasked with purchasing the magic staff. Even though Vast Lushness had informed this person of the time to make a bid right down to the very last second, it was still not particularly easy to achieve this. Moreover, with how the man managed to get an auction panel despite the quandary that they were in, Bluey's felt that his comrades had done him proud this time, and this thought greatly comforted him. Even though his men were now crowding around Gouffet, requesting for him to show them that earth-shatteringly powerful sword of his again, which brought Bluey's some embarrassment, but, frankly speaking, the stats and traits of Gouffet's moonlit nightfalls were so certifiable ludicrous even he could not help but hope to admire it a little longer. Successful, my ass. Young Master Han was livid, and seeing Bluey's happily run over to praise his plan, it was only natural for him to lash out at the man. What's the matter? Bluey's gawked. With that guy messing things up, how would Southern Lone Blade fall for the trap? Young Master Han pointed at Gouffet, who was currently surrounded by Bluey's men, when he gave this reply. Even Fireball was surrounded by a handful of players after he got lucky enough to use Moonlit Nightfalls once. The kid was beside himself with joy at this. Bluey's, of course, knew what young Master Han meant by messing things up, so he helplessly answered, that can't be helped. It's actually a good thing that Brother Miles came up with such a plan to divert people's attention, giving us the chance to snatch a spot by the auction panel. Otherwise, we would have gone through all that trouble for nothing. Young Master Han patted Bluey's heavily on his back. Bro, let me remind you, but what we're doing now is still for nothing. Bluey's was stunned but then realized that his words made sense. They might have managed to win back the magic staff in all their haste, but they had all seemingly forgotten what their purpose was for putting it up for bid in the first place. From this perspective, not only did they fail to make Southern Lone Blade fall for their trap, everyone had also nearly lost the magic staff by putting it up for auction. All they got from this ordeal was a heart-pounding memory of everything that had happened, and their payment of the handling fee that the system charged for the auction. Not wanting to admit that the exciting bid his party had managed to pull off was entirely meaningless, Bluey's struggled to put a positive spin into this. At least, we didn't lose the magic staff. If that's the goal we had in mind, why even put it up for auction? Young Master Han asked. Perhaps Southern Lone Blade and the others still fell for it. There's no telling that they didn't. Bluey's comforted. Young Master Han looked at the sky. It'd be great if they were as stupid as you are. What did you say? Bluey's was infuriated. He already had his prejudice about young Master Han, yet for the sake of a pleasant cooperation, he adopted an achieving concord after discord sort of mentality. However, it appeared that a happy cooperation was just wistful thinking on his part, since this man evidently believed that this cooperation was a total failure. Southern Lone Blade's not going to fall for it. You guys had better continue protecting Vast Lushness magic staff. Young Master Han said matter-of-factly. Do you think we can't protect her? Bluey's seethed. You guys? Young Master Han threw him a contemptuous look before sneering. Hadn't it been for Miles, you guys would have already auctioned off the magic staff by now. How are you going to protect anything? You're the one that came up with the plan. Why didn't you consider that such a situation might occur? Everyone had overlooked the possibility of the auction house filling up to the point there being no space for them to get in. Young Master Han should not be the only one to blame, and Bluey's had no intention of blaming anyone for it either, but feeling slighted by young Master Han's disdainful comments, all he could do was use this very incident as ammunition after failing to find an impactful rebuttal at the moment. Realizing that the situation was taking a turn for the worse, Brother Assist was about to step forward and mediate between the two when young Master Han placidly replied, "Why would I have overlooked such an outcome? I was merely using the situation intentionally to get Vast Lushness's magic staff sold for real, turning the charade into reality to lure Southern Lone Blade out." It's over. Brother Assist sighed to the heavens. The moment he had made sense of young Master Han's true plan, he was already carefully thinking of how to hide this from others. Who would have guessed that young Master Han would just casually reveal this by himself, though he did not even look like he was forced into making the confession, nor did it seem that it was a slip of tongue in a moment of impulse. Young Master Han revealed it entirely because Bluey's happened to raise the issue, thusly, he organically told the truth. What did you say? Bluey's was utterly startled. It was apparent how impactful this revelation was. The contempt that the two had for each other could be written off as mere bickering between compatriots, but young Master Han's admittance was severe enough to turn friends into foes. Unfortunately, it failed. Young Master Han shrugged, looking hardly affected. Brother Assist was almost in tears as he stood by watching this. This man's arrogance was just too abominable. Why must I be the one here at this place? Why couldn't it be Sword Demon, Miles, Royal, or Wounds? Why are the whole lot of them not here instead of me? Before anything happened with either party in the center of the storm, it was the onlooker Brother Assist that got twisted in the wind. What you just say? Repeat it once more. Bluey's spoke haltingly. Young Master Han turned his head and walked away. It was just like Brother Assist had thought. Young Master Han did not speak all that out of impulse or annoyance. Rather, he simply lacked any sort of empathy for others. He only said everything in accordance to the flow of the conversation. Simply regarding Bluey's as repeated once more as a sort of senseless request, young Master Han ignored it and walked away. Stop right there. Bluey's stalked after him in his outrage. Brother Assist rushed to interject. Hey. Brother Assist wanted to say, Don't be mistaken. He only said all that in spite, to help stall for young Master Han, but he immediately thought of how young Master Han would just dismiss his good intention. There was even a good chance that that man would stop and turn his head to regard him scornfully, saying something along the lines of, "Spite? What are you, an idiot?" It was with such considerations that Brother Assist continued to be at a loss for words, simply unable to say anything substantial to help alleviate this mess. A glance from Bluey's here made it all the more apparent that this was no act, so he called for the man to stand still again, even as he lifted his hand and chanted an incantation. A bolt of lightning came crashing down from the sky and struck the ground before young Master Han. Bluey's was stunned. It appeared that young Master Han had listened to his second cry to stand still, for he actually came to a stop. Ultimately, he was not struck by that bolt of lightning, but Bluey's knew that his call for that man to halt was no preemptive warning. He had yelled it just like what people would shout for show when engaging in PvP. Young Master Han coming to a halt obviously meant that he had already expected an attack to come his way, choosing to retreat instead of carrying on his way, which caused the spell Bluey's had tossed over to miss its target. After all, he had calculated it to factor in the advancing pace of young Master Han. State things clearly before you leave. Young Master Han's dodge had caused Bluey's to calm down a bit. Bluey's really felt that his personality had changed. Had it been back when he was in Y City, he would not have even said anything like state things clearly or even call out stop right there twice. Instead, he would have sent a lightning bolt straight at the target right from the start. With a spell released and all that yelling, everyone finally realized that something was happening here and soon crowded around the two. What happened? Vast Lushness did not think too much of this altercation. She knew how unlikable young Master Han was as a person, and given the personality her comrades from Y City had, she was already convinced there was no way they would try to communicate things at first without resorting to fighting right away. This guy, he knew that the auction house would be filled with people in the final hour, yet he made no preparations to secure a position to bid for the staff. In fact, he intentionally failed to mention it and made us pool our gold coins at that time to prevent us from positioning ourselves by the auction panels in time. He really intended to sell off the utopian magic staff in hopes of turning the charade into reality, all in order for Southern Lone Blade to fall for the ploy. Bluey's was no fool, so he even helped young Master Han fill in a bit more detail. The complexion of everybody present changed. How young Master Han had gone about this was utterly callous and far too treacherous. Even Sakurazaka Muni and the others, who considered Gufei and his fellow mercenaries as among their brothers in arms, also felt that what young Master Han had done was too much. Curses rang from every direction, amplified greatly with everyone crowding around him. However, young Master Han turned a deaf ear to their shouting as he nonchalantly swept his gaze across everybody. "You're already like this when the staff is still in your possession. What would you guys do if it really got sold off?" Nobody could stand the fact that he was still mocking them despite the situation he was facing. The crowd took a step closer, as if they were about to reap his soul. Sakurazaka Muni and his men did not follow suit. They showed no intention of stopping them, either. He and his men merely stood where they were as they showed a troubled expression. "Can't you say a few words less?" Brother Assist's tears were flowing freely when he heard young Master Han add kindling to the fire, especially since the latter had delivered it with the air of a big boss. At the same time, Brother Assistants might just become the cannon fodder to this mob, a collateral casualty. How could he find this bearable? "Everybody, don't panic." Suddenly, someone came squeezing out of the crowd. Brother Assist looked and indeed saw his savior. The moment this person took a step over, everybody instinctively retreated a few steps in deference. "Brother Miles, we know very well how indomitable you are, but we're not afraid of death. If you're gonna go out of your way for this man, then you'll have to take us all out as well," Bluey's declared determinedly. Coming face to face against an insurmountable opponent, the man was actually surprisingly calm. "Oh, you misunderstand. I'm here to help you guys," Gufei said as he walked right up to young Master Han. Gufei spoke to the priest before him, but he was similarly addressing everyone around. "You've always been this callous sort." "You?" Young Master Han had just squeezed out that one word when Gufei's fist went flying straight out. No matter how intelligent young Master Han was, and how quick his reaction could be. The difference between Gu Fei and him when it came to close combat was like heaven and earth. This single punch Gu Fei had thrown struck him squarely on the cheek, a blow that sounded solid upon contact. While Gu Fei might not have enough strength to pull this off on most people, it was effective against a priest like young Master Han, who had added his stats according to his golden ratio. His weak character physique meant even someone like Gu Fei, with a bit of strength stats that he got from his equipment, would be able to be halfway decent in hurting young Master Han. Adding his well-honed kung fu skills into the mix, that single punch caused young Master Han's face to turn inward, his head buckled to follow as his body inclined while his legs gave way. The man was swiftly floored with that one hit, creating a cloud of dust when he dropped to the ground. The crowd was quiet. While it was only a punch, that punch from Gu Fei had actually successfully floored the man to such a degree that the average player would be unable to achieve. All they could do was cause their targets turn into a ball of light, yet this punch Gu Fei had thrown made everyone more satisfied than simply slaying young Master Han where he stood. "I've long since wanted to beat you up," Gu Fei said as he stared at young Master Han. Young Master Han had already picked himself up from the ground and was now wiping the corners of his mouth. Nevertheless, he had the same recalcitrant expression. "You motherfucker." Chapter 573, A Little Dispute. After taking such a punch that had left him bedraggled, young Master Han's attitude remained as arrogant as ever. The crowd truly had quite the eye-opener today. What had originally been a very liberating punch just did not seem sufficiently satisfactory anymore. The crowd began to clamor and wave their fists in the air as they encouraged Gu Fei. "Beat him to death! Beat him to death!" Under the steady chant of the crowd, Gu Fei shook his head helplessly. "It'd be great if I could beat him to death. Unfortunately, he's just going to respawn if I beat him up here, and he will still be as detestable as ever when we see him again." That's one thing that online games just isn't great at. Everybody felt their hearts tremble, thinking to themselves that an expert was indeed an expert. Picking someone to make them lose a level was not enough for Gu Fei to vent his anger. Instead, he actually wanted to kill him for real. Sure enough, this man was ruthless to the point that it made people shudder, just like what the rumors had prescribed. Vast Lushness was clearly upset with young Master Han's plan to sell her magic staff away for real, but she and Gu Fei were not as unacquainted with a man like Bluey's and his men. They had spent quite some time around one another when they were doing Traversing Four Seas Guild quest, and they had worked together quite a few times. It would not be too much of an exaggeration to call them as friends. Vast Lushness would always be as icy as a winter's day when facing enemies, but this person before her was no enemy. Even though he was very heartless, his intentions all came from the right place, which was to find a way to take care of their prickly adversary, Southern Lone Blade. With such a thought in mind, Vast Lushness had no wish to be caught up over such small matters. Thus, she went to mediate between the crowd accordingly. "Forget it. The magic staff is still with me, so nothing really happened. There's no need to kill our own over it." With this one statement, Vast Lushness elucidated how she still treated young Master Han as someone on her side. Young Master Han nodded and praised her. "You're way more magnanimous than the rest." Everybody was morose, even Vast Lushness glared at him. "You should at least give us a heads up when you do something like this next time, okay?" "I simply have no faith in all your acting chops," young Master Han replied matter-of-factly. "Is that so? I think you just enjoy this sort of situation where you can fool everyone to the point that they become livid." Gu Fei gave him a side eye. "As long as the plan is effective, everything else is outside my considerations," young Master Han said. "Forget it, let's just leave the matter as it is." Vast Lushness suspected that all these men might end up becoming irritated again after hearing what young Master Han had to say further. At that point, she would no longer be the victim in question and would lose her ability to placate the crowd, so she quickly diffused the matter first by scattering everyone. "No." Gu Fei's hand swung out to interject. "It's not over yet." "What?" Everybody was startled. They became gleeful in the next moment, as they thought that the resident expert felt a single punch was not enough. Perhaps, he wanted to beat the man up further? Ahem! "It's this." "Everyone, look, now that our original plan has failed, we have no choice but to use the cruder iteration that we came up with earlier." "What plan?" Vast Lushness asked. "Give the magic staff to me." Gufei could barely hide his mirth. You asshole, did you intentionally screw things up before? Young Master Han had a hunch that Gufei had ruined his plans on purpose to create their present failed scenario just so he could use that earlier lousy plan of his. Some of Southern Lone Blade's men are still in the auction house, so I think it's best if we let them see us hand over the magic staff to me, Gufei replied. Best, my ass. What's the point of doing this trick? If they see it being handed over to you now, you can always return it to Vastlushness anytime. How in the world have they not thought of that? Young Master Han scoffed. The whole point is to convince them that there's no such possibility, so I won't be returning it to her first, Gufei insisted. But they will still target Vastlushness. What's the point of you holding on to that magic staff, then? You might as well just leave it in the warehouse, young Master Han argued. They'll believe it's not on Vastlushness any longer after they kill her 5, 6, 7 times. By then, they'll come looking for me, Gufei replied. Hey! Vastlushness was far from satisfied with that answer. Why did she suddenly have to die 5, 6, or even 7 times? See? Young Master Han shrugged toward Vastlushness. I was just trying to sacrifice your magic staff, which wasn't really a sacrifice, since you would get a huge sum of gold coins in exchange. This guy, on the other hand, wants to directly forfeit your life and levels very inhumanely. Why isn't anyone coming out to beat him up? Vastlushness did not know whether to laugh or cry at this. If I knew that all this would happen, I would have just truly sold it off. It's not gonna be valuable if you sell it off now. The people are a bit vague about the price for this sort of rare equipment since they've never seen it before. That's why everyone was stirred into a frenzied bidding war when it first appeared. But if a second utopian magic staff were to appear, the price then would surely be a huge drop from what you could have gotten earlier. The more cautious players might even suspect that there's something wrong with the item. It was unknown where Brother Assist had appeared from, but he gave his 2 cents worth based on his wealth of experience right away. I was merely saying that out of spite. Vastlushness was almost losing her mind. What sort of company was she keeping? One wanted to sacrifice her magic staff, another wanted to sacrifice 5, 6, or 7 levels of hers, and now this person took the words she had spoken in exasperation seriously as an honest plan. Are you guys working with one another to tease me? Vastlushness really harbored such suspicions at this very moment. The 3 glanced at one another and shrugged. Let's just leave the matter as it is. It's up to Southern Lone Blade whomever he ends up looking for. In any case, I don't have the magic staff on me, and it can be stored in the auction house for up to a week. That guy will take 10 days off from the game after retrieving the magic staff. It will be more than half a month before I can get my magic staff back, so if Southern Lone Blade can lift it off me, then let him. Alright, dismissed. Vastlushness snapped. That's just too damn heartless. The people exclaimed. They had already thought the original plan to keep the magic staff over in the auction house for a whole week was very inhumane as it was, but they had not expected Vastlushness to be all the more vicious, to actually find someone who would not be coming online to Parallel World for a number of days after picking up the magic staff. At this rate, Southern Lone Blade would have to spend half a month waiting for the magic staff to come online before they could get a chance to loot it. How would that even be a larceny attempt by then? The 7 of them would instead look like the 7 Calabash brothers, combining into one entity to guard the utopian magic staff. Instead, now that the victim in question had been angered to this point, no one else dared risk their neck to voice out their opinion. Everyone watched Vastlushness turn her head and walked off in a huff. Bluey's and Sakura Sakamuni ran after her with their respective men in tow. Don't either of you follow me, I wanna see just what Southern Lone Blade is gonna do. Vastlushness was really depressed right now. She had been nothing more than a target of robbery. It was normal for players in online games to kill one another for loot, yet a simple matter like this had actually been turned into such a mess. Vastlushness could no longer stand having to cautiously move about with a whole horde of players tagging along like this. That's right. There's no point in the whole lot of you following us tightly like this. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Svelte Dancer leapt out and bellowed. With that, she hugged Vastlushness and said, "Let's go play." Yeah. Vastlushness nodded, and the 2 ladies walked away while holding hands. While she was not looking, Svelte dancer swung her free hand over his shoulders and raised a V sign to Gufei. Gufei shook his head and sighed. Vast Lushness was trying to play it cool, but she ended up becoming a bait for someone else. Instead, Blueys and Sakurazakamuni did not dare to give chase but were also feeling uneasy about not following her. The two men shared the same look of dread, which caused them to see each other as even more of an eyesore, and their bickering soon resumed once they started insulting each other. Eternal Dominion still had no idea about the whole story of this entire situation. Scratching his head, he sought Gufei for enlightenment. Just what is going on? Are we still picking Southern Lone Blade? Why are we selling a magic staff? And why did we buy back the staff we sold ourselves? How is it that we are still angry after buying it back? That's the plan to lure Southern Lone Blade out, Gufei replied succinctly. Then, where's Southern Lone Blade? Eternal Dominion instinctively looked around them when he heard his answer. He seemed to be mocking their failed ploy. Perhaps, he'll appear soon, young Master Han replied rather abruptly. And just what plan do you have now? Brother Assist could not help but shudder involuntarily when he heard that statement. Look at how happily everyone's quarreling right now. Young Master Han was gazing at the two parties Blueys and Sakurazakamuni were leading, both looking as if they were about to break out into an all-out brawl. Gufei took this chance to leap out and interrupt the two, shouting for the two parties to stop their fighting. You're better off thinking of new ways to protect Vast Lushness if you all have so much time and energy to squabble with each other. You've already seen the lengths that Southern Lone Blade was willing to go, Gufei said. Do you have an idea, drunk bro? Sakurazakamuni quickly stepped in right next to the man, as if to show that he was the party more acquainted with Gufei. This guy? He's just like that lot of comrades he hangs around fault with. I think the only thing he wants is to slay Southern Lone Blade. Have you guys even considered protecting Vast Lushness? Blueys probed. You're not wrong there. Which is why you guys are in charge of protecting that woman. Don't slack off. Gufei beamed. TSK. Blueys' nostrils flared as he led his men away. That Blueys looks to be very concerned with Vast Lushness. The two of them have known each other for a long time. Perhaps, he's been carrying a torch for her all this while? It looks like Mooney's got himself a rival. That's what I've been saying, with how reprehensible Mooney is, there's no way that he'll manage to snag himself such a good lady like Vast Lushness. The men from Forever in Flowers bantered, their conversation being entirely irrelevant to what was happening. However, Sakurazakamuni was apparently a lot more concerned with what they were talking about. He grew more alarmed the more he heard of the ongoing discussion. As such, he hurriedly bid Gufei farewell and swiftly left as well. Even though the two parties went in the opposite direction of each other, they had the same destination, thus, it was only a matter of time before they bumped into each other again. All those men were now gone, leaving just Gufei, young Master Han, Brother Assist, and Eternal Dominion standing there. So, do we have a plan? Brother Assist was getting more convinced that there was more to what Gufei and young Master Han had done. It's precisely that. Intentionally cause everyone to bicker with one another and have them disband while feeling disgruntled with one another, young Master Han replied. Brother Assist was lost. It's all for the sake of showing Southern Lone Blade that our plan has utterly failed, young Master Han added. What do you mean? But what he understood from our failure is different from our concept of what truly transpired. He will see our failure as a good thing for him, young Master Han continued. What you mean to say is that we're trying to make Southern Lone Blade believe that we've made a mistake by pretending to sell off that magic staff. Brother Assist said. Young Master Han nodded. Since we've failed in realizing our charade in actuality, all we can do is blur the line between fiction and reality. Then, that punch miles through at you is all part of your plan? Brother Assist asked. Young Master Han laughed bitterly. He had given Gufei the go-ahead to park a few people to make their argument seem more intense, but never had he thought that Gufei would just punch him. Instead, I was serious when I said that line, though. Gufei actually explained himself. I've really wanted to punch you for a very long time now. Young Master Han nodded as well. I was also serious about what I said before. What did you say? Gufei was puzzled. He could not remember if young Master Han had said anything crucial. You asshole. Young Master Han repeated himself. Chapter 574, looking at one another. Brother Assist lowered his head in deep thought for a moment, still a little lost. He looked at young Master Han and said, "Can you give me a more detailed and clear-cut explanation, without hiding any part of the plan? You still don't get it?" Young Master Han was the sort that would probably die if he could not contemptuously regard anyone at every waking moment of his life, much less when Brother Assist had served himself up for it. Conversely, Brother Assist was the sort that would probably die if he could not find out the truth of anything, so he had no choice but to bear with being disdained all for the sake of knowing the truth. "Okay, listen good. The trap I've originally said was exactly what you guys knew about. It's not complex, and its sole purpose was to raise Southern Lone Blade and his team's suspicion. They would of course suspect that it's a trap. They would wonder what the trap was attempting to achieve, and perhaps wonder if they can avoid it. The way I see it, they'd surely try to find a way to turn the trap back on us. That would be the smart move here, and I do believe that that's precisely what Southern Lone Blade and the others would do." However, in the process of uncovering the trap, they discovered, much to their surprise, that it isn't a trap at all. Perhaps, it was a trap once, but because of a change in how the Cell of Vast Lushness magic staff went, they finally saw a window of opportunity. The moment such a thought crossed their mind, that would be when they fell for my trap. Which is why it's fine that Miles' foolish action had raised their suspicion. There's nothing worth suspecting in the first stage of the trap. It's just unfortunate that he actually managed to get Vast Lushness's magic staff back in possession, and this made it impossible for my plan to proceed on to the next stage. Southern Lone Blade's gang can attempt to trap us with our trap, but we have nothing on our end. "Hey, asshole, whose side are you on?" Young Master Han explained as he scornfully glared over at Gufei again. Box Nouvelle. Coem. Alas, Gufei was not even listening to him. Instead, he was gesturing at something with eternal dominion. Young Master Han glanced at the two men with an ominous expression. It seemed that Gufei was regaling eternal dominion with his experience of giving that one punch, while eternal dominion was showing a look of someone eager to try it out himself. "We're letting them suspect that something is up first before letting them eliminate that possibility themselves." "I see." Brother Assist was far more attentive listening to young Master Han's account. "But it's not like you're out of plans right now, either. That dispute that you've created to make everyone split up, are you trying to cheat them into believing that we've really sold the magic staff away?" "That's right." "But compared to really selling the magic staff off, this sort of lie is nothing more than a backup plan." "There are simply too many variables to this scenario," young Master Han replied. So where are Sword Demon and the others?" Brother Assist only realized now that he had not seen any of the three men after they had departed from the auction house. "I had them stay behind at the auction house to take note of Southern Lone Blade's team's movement," young Master Han replied. "Just the three of them? Wouldn't they get into trouble?" Brother Assist had also fought against Southern Lone Blade's team with the others before, and despite his average combat expertise, Brother Assist still had quite the eye for it. If they did not have the indomitable Gufei on their side, they would probably be evenly matched against that bunch of larcenists. As such, they would surely be at a disadvantage if it were just Sword Demon, Royal God Call, and War Without Wounds. Royal can rely on his eagle eye from afar and Sword Demon knows stealth. "What's there to worry about?" young Master Han asked. "What about wounds? The auction house is a safe zone." "Oh, yeah. So why isn't there any news from them yet?" Brother Assist asked. "Why don't you use the mercenary channel and ask them yourselves?" Young Master Han, who had explained at length, was clearly annoyed by now. Brother Assist's thirst for knowledge and information was frighteningly inexhaustible. Young Master Han immediately saw him send the message over to the channel. Over at the auction house. Flame-cinched clothes and glue stayed behind even after the crowd had left. Soon, they saw War Without Wounds appear, causing their heart rates to increase rapidly. Of course, neither of them was actually afraid of War Without Wounds, yet his presence here represented the frightening figures of the mercenary group he belonged. "Calm yourself. This is a safe zone." The two repeated this to themselves. War Without Wounds evidently understood this point as he swaggered over without protection. The two men looked at each other before glancing at the side. They were right beside the distribution NPC. Since War Without Wounds was heading over here, could he be here to retrieve the goods? You're both looking busy. In the end, it was War Without Wounds who had unexpectedly addressed the two very casually when he came near them. The two were momentarily at a loss for words, immediately becoming passive in this exchange. There's no need to wait any longer, the buyer of that magic staff isn't gonna appear, War Without Wounds informed. Why is that? Flame-Singed Clothes uttered this question in a moment of impulse. It was apparent that he was not the sort to have any subtlety. Ha ha ha. I'm actually just bluffing. Perhaps that person is gonna appear, so you guys had better diligently wait here for his or her appearance. War Without Wounds laughed. The two grinded their teeth, hating the fact that they were in a safe zone right now. Where's your boss? War Without Wounds looked around. Where's your boss? The two countered. Our leader's me. Don't you guys know that? War Without Wounds was brazen with his words. Since we're both warriors, and bosses as well, help me set a meeting with him, so we can all have a duel. War Without Wounds continued shamelessly. He doesn't have the time or the mind to humor you, Flame-Singed Clothes rebutted. Oh, that's right. War Without Wounds nodded. You guys need to wait patiently for the buyer's appearance. Ha 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 ha. When War Without Wounds was done speaking, he lifted his claymore right above his shoulders. Leaving for an auction panel as he strutted off, he ignored the two men altogether. Flame-Singed Clothes and Glue looked as if they had just suffered an internal injury. Glue was still considerably calm and quickly related the appearance and ensuing exchange with War Without Wounds over to Southern Lone Blade. Meanwhile, Southern Lone Blade had just received a message from Blackwater, who had been busy tailing their enemies. A fight broke within Vast Lushness's group in the middle of the road, and everyone went their separate ways afterward. Are you certain? Southern Lone Blade kept an eye on the whole lot of them, all in the hopes of confirming his assessment from their actions. This splitting of ways was something outside his calculations. Of course, I was too far to hear what they were talking about, but they definitely quarreled. They even fought, Blackwater vowed. In detail, please. That priest with 1,000 Miles Drunk seemed to be having a disagreement with Vast Lushness and company, yet 1,000 Miles Drunk actually took her side and pummeled that man to the ground with a punch. More words were shouted after, and Vast Lushness angrily stalked off with Svelte Dancer. The others squabbled further and went their separate ways as well. The ones still around are just 1,000 Miles Drunk slut, and they appeared to be fighting over something as well, Blackwater reported. Just what's going on? Southern Lone Blade was momentarily puzzled. And there's a piece of bad news, Blackwater added. What is it? There's a fighter with 1,000 Miles Drunk and the others, and from his features, I believe that he's Eternal Dominion, Blackwater replied. Motherfucker. Southern Lone Blade could not help but swear. A single 1,000 Miles Drunk was already troublesome to deal with, now, there was actually an additional Eternal Dominion that they had to worry about. What now? Blackwater asked. Who do you have eyes on now? Southern Lone Blade asked. 1,000 Miles Drunk. Okay. Carry on but be careful. Got it. Receiving these pieces of information from both ends, Southern Lone Blade began to furrow his eyebrows in contemplation of their current situation. From what Yiziaru had told him, he could more or less confirm that this was a trap Goofei's lot had staged for them. It was a trap to bait his group into revealing themselves. However, he had been patrolling the vicinity of the auction house by himself and saw no traces of any ambush of sorts. Patty-Scented Pastures and the others, who had been sent to the various spawn points in the city, did not discover any sort of setup either. All these facts were simply too inconsistent to common sense. Still, this explained why they had not seen the buyer all this while. Perhaps, the opposing party was readying their setup before retrieving the magic staff to lure them into their trap. It was just that Goofei's sudden auction stunned, as well as War Without Wounds' appearance to mock Flame-Singed Clothes and Glue, had left Southern Lone Blade feeling a little lost and unable to make sense of things. Furthermore, for their enemies to enter a dispute, was it because of Goofei inadvertently revealing their ploy? Why would he expose himself in the first place? Though Southern Lone Blade's team had not backed away just because they suspected that it was all a trap. It was just like what young Master Han had said, while they were glad to have uncovered it in the first place, there was indeed far too many options for them to turn the trick onto their opponents. Southern Lone Blade had made plenty of arrangements, keeping watch of the auction house, keeping an eye on their enemies' movements, and taking note of the various ambush points. He had done all that just so he could have a better understanding of their opponent's entrapment in an attempt to make headway in this matter. Just when he thought that he had gotten a general read of the opposing party's plans, Gufei's one move created another huge mystery. Adding to this were War Without Wound's appearance and the enemy group's internal strife. Right now, Southern Lone Blade just could not come up with a logical explanation for all that. War Without Wounds appears to be squandering our time. Glue suddenly sent this message. What? That guy is loitering before our sights sends any signs of the intention to leave. We have no idea just what he's up to. Glue began to voice out his suspicions. He's staring at you too? Southern Lone Blade asked. Most probably. But that arrogance of his is making me uncomfortable, Glue replied. Wait a minute. An idea suddenly popped into Southern Lone Blade's mind. Is he keeping an eye on you guys, or is he looking at that distribution NPC? What do you mean? What I mean is that he may be staring at you too, but in fact, he's actually staring at the distribution NPC. Why would he need to keep an eye on it? Glue was a little lost. To find out who bought the magic staff, of course, replied Southern Lone Blade. But weren't they the ones who had put up the whole charade of selling and buying it? Glue was still a little confused. That's the original plan, but their act hit a snag, I think. Southern Lone Blade supposed. What did you discover? Glue hurriedly asked. First, it's Thousand Miles Drunk's appearance. With how sensitive his arrival was, there must be a reason that had forced his hand. His action wasn't without meaning. That whole auction stunt he pulled, what sort of impact did that create? Many players began to surround him. Glue replied. That's right. Now, think, you were still joking with me before, saying that that's a scene yet to be seen in auction houses, Southern Lone Blade said. Glue abruptly put two and two together. They're unable to snatch a spot by an audition panel due to the huge crowd. Do you mean to say that they ended facing such a problem, so Thousand Miles Drunk had to jump out and divert everyone's attention for their men to get a spot? Yes. Considering how his stunt ended before the actual auction did, their men probably managed to take a position next to an auction panel. Grabbing a spot didn't mean that they'd win the auction itself, though, Southern Lone Blade said. Their men had an internal strife right after leaving the auction house. Wasn't that because their charade had turned into reality, and the magic staff got successfully sold off for real? Southern Lone Blade continued. Yeah. Then, the appearance of War Without Wounds in the auction house is all the more not pointless. Selling the magic staff for that amount of gold might not be acceptable to Vast Lushness, and while that has got nothing to do with us, it's one reason she and her entourage won't be wasting any more of their time and effort entangling with us. She's upset that the magic staff got sold off for nothing. After all, she expects us to hunt her still to loot the magic staff. She might even be feeling dejected right now because of it. It's only Thousand Miles Drunk's group that loves opposing us, and that's also why War Without Wounds appeared before you two to say all that drivel, Southern Lone Blade posited. So what's the point of him spouting all that nonsense? Glue was nonplussed. Miles' exposure would surely raise serious doubts in us. They are clearly well aware of this fact, and adding the fact that the magic staff actually got sold off, their plan has more or less failed spectacularly. However, they have no clue on how much of the situation we know, which is why War Without Wounds vacillates between the buyer appearing to retrieve the goods and not. Actually, they are trying to test to see our reaction, attempting to find out just how much we would get of what has transpired, Southern Lone Blade explained. If that's the case, to use his words with the intention of probing what they were thinking, Glue did not expect that halfwit to be such a profound schemer. Was that exchange of words from before nothing more than just shameless teasing? Would the #1 warrior in the MMO community be such a simple character? Southern Lone Blade commented somberly. He was never someone who would underestimate his opponents. Glue wiped off his sweat. He was starting to wonder if his flame-cinched clothes reaction earlier had tipped off the opposing party of anything. So why is he still standing there and not leaving? Glue asked. I've already told you, with the magic staff getting auctioned for real, they need to find out who ended up owning it, too, Southern Lone Blade replied. Do they intend to target the buyer and get that magic staff back as well? Glue was shocked. That's a bit hard to say, but one thing is for sure, we are bound to appear wherever the magic staff ends up. This is the same scenario as what they originally intended when they first enacted their plan. It's all just to lure us out, anyway. Southern Lone Blade said. This is so troublesome. Their group has us in their vices. They're unwilling to let go even though we haven't looted their equipment even once, Glue lamented. We've made the attempt to loot their equipment, but ultimately failed, Southern Lone Blade reminded. That's Big South all right, he's so full of confidence. As Glue thought of this, he felt that Goofy might not even privy being their target once for looting. Truly, they were so insignificant they did not even manage to get their intentions across. They were already being hunted down before they could even reveal their reason for targeting the mage. So, what should we be doing now? Glue asked. It's imperative for us to learn who ended up buying the Utopian magic staff. Even though they have a man on the scene as well, we must still do our due diligence and keep an eye on this as well. However, we'll have to approach it from a long con perspective after. Otherwise, we'll just end up in their clutches the moment we make our move, Southern Lone Blade said. Those guys couldn't possibly be thinking of taking us out while looting that magic staff, right? Glue asked. We can't eliminate such a possibility. Vast Lushness appears to be very pissed off that the magic staff ended up being sold by accident, and by the looks of things, the chances of Thousand Miles Drunk and his bunch being the ones who had proposed the plan are high. Using this method to return the magic staff to Vast Lushness isn't an impossible option. That's really annoying. With them having their eye on the same target, how are we ever going to make our move? Glue complained. Don't be so hasty. There's always an opportunity. Chapter 575, a repeat of the plan except. Across the mercenary channel of Young Master's Elite, Young Master Han was collating the information from the other three members. I had visual on Southern Lone Blade, but I lost him soon after. The man is cautious, very professional. Royal God Call said. I understand, Young Master Han said in response. What are you trying to say, huh? Royal God Call was miffed. I really lost sight of him after he rounded a corner in the street. Have you identified which street it is that you lost him? Young Master Han asked. In the end, it was Sword Demon who answered. Royal's poor sense of direction isn't to blame. Southern Lone Blade is indeed hard to keep track of. Even I came across him, but I lost him soon after as well. The man is very careful. He often takes the winding roads and has plenty of gear ready to change in and out of. This was the difference between parallel world and real life. How many people would notice once someone changed their outfit in the middle of the street? It was common in games for this to happen, and quite a number of players would have 2 or 3 sets of clothes in their possession. Not everyone owned top-grade equipment that was exquisite looking, and while most players hardly cared for their appearance when engaging in PvP, they would put effort into looking aesthetically pleasing when going from place to place in major hubs to run errands, quests, or lounge in taverns. This was especially true for flirts like War Without Wounds and Royal God Call. Once, Royal God Call had gotten himself a piece of clothing with good stats and traits, but because of how terrible he looked wearing it, making him appear to be like an onion when wearing it, the boy had to fight back his tears as he sold it off. If that was how the male players acted with clothes, not much was needed to be mentioned about the female players out there. The warehouse essentially worked like a wardrobe for them, ignoring whether a piece of equipment was useful or not. They would just store anything that looked good. In such a VR setting, wearing the same outfit for 2 weeks while walking about on the streets was already too much of an embarrassment for the ladies. Southern Lone Blade was pretty much acting like a vain lady, but it was not because he treated his warehouse like a wardrobe. He always carried a variety of equipment and outfits on his person that was enough to give him a full makeover any time. This was a habit he had adopted due to the risky profession he had. Their team of 7 had split up to do their tasks respectively, and Southern Lone Blade's role this time was to take note of the movement around the auction house's vicinity. There was no doubt that this was the most dangerous place to be, so Southern Lone Blade prepared up to 7 sets of equipment to change into whenever he needed, encapsulating the 7 job classes available in the game. Even though he was unable to confirm if he was truly being followed, he would still change gear when he walked from place to place. Southern Lone Blade had already internalized the saying a careful boatman can steer a boat for a millennium to the extreme level. Furthermore, Royal Godcall's conclusion was true. Southern Lone Blade had indeed been cautious and professional enough. The difference between amateur stalkers like Sword Demon and Royal Godcall and professional larcenists were made all the more obvious once Southern Lone Blade began to implement countermeasures against being followed. "How are things on your end, Wounds?" young Master Han asked. "Those two motherfuckers are still here." War Without Wounds, who had been spending quite some time in the company of Bluey's men, became quite taken with their colorful language. "How did they react to you?" young Master Han asked. "The son of a bitch spat at me. If they have the balls to walk out that door, I'm gonna make sure I kill them both with my bare hands." War Without Wounds acted superior. "Have you confirmed that there's no one else from their gang outside?" young Master Han asked again. "Yep. I don't see anyone else," Sword Demon responded. "Southern Lone Blade is still skulking about in its vicinity," Royal Godcall added. "I've spotted him, too," said Sword Demon. They were still experts in their own rights, so they needed not sneak around like Southern Lone Blade's gang. Checking out the situation openly if the need arose was easy for them. Young Master Han grew pensive. Brother Assist would naturally not let this slip past him and asked right away, "What's the matter?" "Those guys are truly a dare above the rest when it comes to stalking and evading. If I'm not mistaken, someone is already spying on us right now," young Master Han replied. Brother Assist immediately looked over his shoulder. Gu Fei and Eternal Dominion were discussing about Kung Fu with a one-track mind, not even caring about the situation at hand. The moment young Master Han said that someone was possibly spying on them, the two swept behind them with their eyes. "Even if someone's snooping on us, that person won't be too near, so there's no way for them to hear what we're discussing," Gu Fei stated. "What's the range you can sense people?" Eternal Dominion asked. "About 10 meters. That's really powerful." "I can only sense about 5 to 7 meters away," Eternal Dominion remarked enviously. "That's just the variation between individuals." "Look." The two began anew their Kung Fu discussion, leaving young Master Han and Brother Assist helpless, unable to make sense of a single thing exchanged. Both teams dealt with their matters. The only safe zone the auction house provided acted as a point of intersection for them. War Without Wounds no longer walked around aimlessly and just hung by the entrance with his claymore on his shoulder. Half of his figure was outside the doorway while another half was inside it. His face had the smuggest look as he stared Southern Lone Blade's two comrades down, his intention to intimidate them blatant. Alas, the two men merely glanced at him from time to time, and most of their attention was centered on the players approaching the distribution NPC. War Without Wounds was a little peeved by this. Compared to how he had managed to ruffle the two earlier, flame-cinched clothes and glue were far more composed now. Their eyes even showed the slightest look of provocation whenever they strayed onto War Without Wounds. "How much longer must I stay here? What's the point of me doing this, anyway?" War Without Wounds was getting impatient. Young Master Han had instructed him to head over to the auction house, but when he asked what he would be doing here, the latter merely told him that it was all up to him. This was why he had openly expressed his shamelessness. He had his fun at the start, but the novelty of it soon wore off, and now he was left feeling bored. Unable to do anything but merely stand there despite being despised, War Without Wounds was no longer willing to continue with this task since he knew that verbally sparring with the two would just leave a bad aftertaste in his mouth for its lack of technical substance. Thus, he voiced out his dissent to young Master Han. "Can't you be a little more patient? Just look at how professional our opponents are," young Master Han said. "They've got two stationed here. Send a babe to accompany me, and I'll show you what's professional," War Without Wounds replied. "Aren't there ladies walking around the auction house or something? Just randomly get one for yourself," young Master Han suggested. "Oh." This one line reminded him that his gaze had been fixed on the two men ever since his arrival here. Changing out to his better-looking armor, War Without Wounds began to scan the crowd present in the auction house, hitting on any potential prey that caught his eye no matter what the circumstance was. He soon racked up 3 separate instances of eye rolls under his belt, but he was enjoying himself thoroughly, as if he had suddenly found his life purpose. Flame-cinched clothes and glue might seem unconcerned with War Without Wounds' presence on the surface, but they were actually paying very close attention to him. The moment they saw the man, who was originally idling at the door, suddenly transform into a pollinating bee and appear not to care about them anymore. Both men perceived this as a very serious situation, so they hurriedly reported it to Southern Lone Blade. HMPH. Maintain your composure, Southern Lone Blade said. He's intentionally acting at ease, so that we won't get an idea on what cards he's holding. Relax, you two. I already have a good grasp of how they think. This was originally a ploy to make us reveal ourselves by auctioning the item we're targeting, but in that final round of bidding for the Utopian magic staff, everything got ruined because they neglected to consider the resulting crowd that would gather. Even though Thousand Miles Drunk deliberately pulled that stunt to create chaos, they still failed to win back the item at the final moment. Therefore, they ended up quarreling, perhaps because the idea was from Thousand Miles Drunk's bunch. They may be looking for penitence or something, and that's why they plan to snatch the staff back. Still, they don't want to let us off easy and want to turn this mistake of theirs into another trick. It's a trap within a trap. That War Without Wounds is clearly there to see who ends up gaining ownership of the magic staff, and he purposely said all that nonsense to throw us off. Honestly, there's absolutely no need to be overly concerned with that man. As long as he is still in the auction house, my assessment will be correct. If that's not the case, what other reasons could there be to explain his presence here at this time? So what are we doing? The two asked. Just do what I've instructed you to do. Find out who owns the magic staff now, the clearer the better. We're not gonna make our move today. Then, wouldn't they have the jump on us? The jump on us? Let them go on ahead. Do you really think that it's gonna drop for them just because they wanted it to? Have we ever done any assignment where we didn't have to put plenty of effort and thought before we accomplished it? These guys are underestimating this matter if they think that this is just finding out the identity of the new owner and hunting them after. Let them make the first move, we'll show them what it means to be professional after, Southern Lone Blade replied. The two men felt reassured after hearing that, and they continued to focus on what they needed to pay attention to, no longer bothering about War Without Wounds. For his part, War Without Wounds also no longer cared about the two men as his heart and soul were invested in harassing the ladies in the auction house. Young Master Han said that he only needed to pay casual attention to what was happening in this location. After all, he was not tasked with accomplishing any important mission. 2 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Glue and flame-cinched clothes lived up to their reputation as professionals, being able to keep their loneliness at bay and treat this like their real-life job. At the moment, the two men gave War Without Wounds another side eye, as that person had actually been madly harassing the ladies these whole 2 hours. It was quite the display of his shameless mentality. In actuality, the two men were thinking too highly of War Without Wounds. The man might have spent these 2 hours talking to the ladies, but so far, he had not gotten any of them. In fact, he was feeling very discouraged right now, and he even sent a message asking if this matter was over to young Master Han. Are those two still there? Yeah. That's great. Looks like they've taken the bait. Young Master Han sighed. Taken the bait? Our original plan should have been exposed, and there's absolutely no need for them to waste any time over at the auction house in that case. It doesn't matter who ends up retrieving the magic staff and what time it is done, as it will still be returned to Vast Lushness, so they won't be wrong to seek her out after 7 days. But since they are actually spending a lot of time loitering there, it seems that we've finally pulled a fast one on them. Believing the magic staff is no longer in our possession, they remain committed to wait for the buyer to come retrieve it, young Master Han explained. Is that so? War Without Wounds could not really make sense of his words. Wounds, you've contributed quite a lot this time. Sword Demon, give him 50 points, young Master Han ordered. Roger that. Sword Demon answered. Ha ha ha. That is only natural. You guys didn't see how yours truly have stood there at the auction house, scaring those two motherfuckers like a motherfucker. War Without Wounds immediately bragged. So, what's our next step? Brother Assist asked. Next step? Get the person to collect the magic staff, of course. Since they've taken the bait, the situation is much easier for us to grasp now, young Master Han replied. Considering how effective this is, we should have used this plan right from the get-go. Brother Assist sighed. Compared to selling the magic staff for real, there are simply too many variables involved in doing it like this. We're simply lucky not to have run into any of them this time, Young Master Han remained obdurate. Meanwhile, Vast Lushness, who had been taking in the scenery of Beishi City with Svelte Dancer, was stunned when she received a message. What? You want to retrieve the staff right now? That's right. Southern Lone Blade and the others have already fallen into my trap. Retrieving the magic staff now will immediately draw them to make their move, young Master Han explained. What trap? Vast Lushness was confused. Young Master Han gave a general explanation, and Vast Lushness was secretly shocked after she had heard it. Sure enough, this was the team that had once overthrown her old guild, past deeds. Well capable of creating a trap out of an existing vulnerability while they were out of options, Vast Lushness truly thought that their guild's destruction was not any sort of injustice. But we have yet to send anyone to a spawn point. Vast Lushness, with her ruthless temper intact, would not be satisfied with just one kill. Don't even bother setting up. I suspect that that guy already knows that we'll do such a thing and has his people pay attention to movements around the various spawn points in order to infer just what we are planning, young Master Han rejected. Then, what do we do? Kill him that one time? Vast Lushness was hardly contented. Even though Southern Lone Blade failed to loot her magic staff or caused any substantial damage on her, she already labeled him as an enemy. What I mean is that there's no need to make preparations as they may be observing us. Wait till we make our move to make your arrangements. By then, it won't matter if they are aware or otherwise. There are only 7 of them, with 2 priests and no fighter. Just send your men at the respective spawn points according to the manpower you have. Young Master Han reasoned. Okay, I get it. Vast Lushness felt that young Master Han's plan was sound. Yet Louise became ruffled when she relayed the information to him. You're still trusting that rascal? It's a pretty good plan. Vast Lushness explained the gist of it, and Louise was also very surprised, even boldly wondering, could it be that that guy has purposely said all that earlier to show that we are having an internal strife to Southern Lone Blade and his men? Vast Lushness was quiet for a time. That was indeed the plan young Master Han had in mind when he said all that before. Yet he had never once denied that his original plan was to sell off Vast Lushness's magic staff for real. While Vast Lushness did not take things to heart as severely as Louise did, she would never consider young Master Han to be such a noble character, either. Nonetheless, she thought that it would not be a bad thing to have Louise and his men believing it as such. At the very least, the continued cooperation between them would proceed more smoothly in this manner, so she replied immediately, "That's probably it." Damn. Then, what are we wasting time talking for? Quick, it's time for us to move. Louise began rallying his men. Vast Lushness also relayed this message to Sakurazaka Muni. They needed to cover 6 spawn points, so the more the merrier. Sakurazaka Muni's group had an idol like Gufei on their side, so their concern over the matter was so minute that it was negligible. None of them dawdled for even another minute the moment they heard that they were needed. Lastly, Vast Lushness informed the priest, who had helped them bid for that magic staff, to go ahead and retrieve the magic staff. Right now? Isn't it supposed to be a week later? The person heard Louise rallying everyone and was wondering to himself what it was for. Change of plans. There's greater advantage to grabbing the magic staff now. Quickly retrieve it. Vast Lushness replied. I'm not in the city right now, and it's pretty far. It's fine. We'll wait for you. It's getting kind of late, I'm about to log off. Stay on for a bit more, this plan isn't gonna work without you. Big Sister Lushness. Actually, I failed to win the bid for the magic staff. Chapter 576, A Bold Suspicion. What did you say? Vast Lushness felt so dizzy when she read the last message, and her reply gave off the feeling how tongue-tied she felt. I didn't win the bid for the magic staff. The man initially struggled to admit to the truth, but after spilling the beans, the ensuing messages the person sent were quick and no longer beating around the bush. What happened exactly? Vast Lushness asked. I had a good read of the time to make my bid, but when I placed my bid, the system prompted me that the auction's item is no longer up for bidding. I believe that I might have been a tad too late to send my bid through, the bidding master explained. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I thought that there's still a week. The person answered meekly. Vast Lushness was well acquainted with this man, which was why she felt reassured to entrust this task to him. The moment she heard his answer, She knew what he had intended to do. This was similar to a boss assigning work to his trusted aide, but something unexpected cropping up prevented the task from being completed in time. Still, since the superior would only inspect the work in a week's time, this essentially meant that the subordinate had an entire week to come up with a solution to the problem. While this sort of incident would often occur in real life, she had truly never expected herself to come across something similar while playing online games. What's the point of that? Vastlushness suddenly found it too difficult to speak further, as it was apparent that he only had such thoughts due to the importance placed on that staff. Where are you right now? The auction house. She instantly got it. This person was also thinking of waiting for the real buyer to show up, probably in hopes of resolving the matter by buying back the staff with a high price. This transaction would naturally be an extremely unique situation, where the price of the magic staff itself could be ignored, as the sum spent in this instance would be for the sake of shouldering the responsibility. Vastlushness reckoned that he would bring the buyer to the trade exchange immediately, taking that step to become a pay-to-win warrior. Forget it, let it remain sold. She could not really find it in her to reprimand him for his actions. With this conversation over, she proceeded to message young Master Han. It's as you wished. Are you done arranging everything? Young Master Han asked. No, I mean that the magic staff has really gotten sold, Vastlushness said. What? Young Master Han was surprised. The magic staff has been sold as per your wishes. She sighed as she sent this message. This entire incident had so many twists and turns that even she was at a loss for words. Fuck. Young Master Han spat this single expletive out in person when he received the message, causing Brother Assist to have quite the fright. What happened? Brother Assist quickly asked. What did I tell you? A variable occurred. Young Master Han was visibly annoyed. The Utopian magic staff has actually been sold. The buyer lied to us. Why would he? Brother Assist started to ask. He most likely thought himself as clever, wanting to use his money to buy it back from the new owner, which is why he told the white lie. Young Master Han interrupted. Brother Assist scratched his head and contemplated this before saying, but this doesn't seem to affect us too greatly. Essentially, we're now back to the original plan of yours where the charade becomes reality. Wouldn't everything be fine if we go according to plan? Why would it be that simple? Young Master Han said. Let me give you an example. There are two plans here, A and B. A is a smokescreen and meant to be seen by the enemies for them to think that we are executing A when, in fact, we're executing B. This is the crux of our entire plan. But since we've successfully let A become the smokescreen like we wanted, we can't enact plan B. Do you think we can once more use the smokescreen A as the real plan? Why not? Please man. We've already very clearly conveyed the entirety of this plan to Southern Lone Blade's team. He's sure to come up with a strategy that will perfectly counter what we're doing. If we continue with plan A, we'll pretty much be walking right into a trap knowingly, young Master Han said. After hearing your explanation, it does appear to be the case. Brother Assist nodded. While young Master Han's example with plan A and B was not what was happening right now, the logic it expressed was evident. Furthermore, he had similarly expected the first iteration of young Master Han's plan to indeed possess the duality of plan A and B, working in concert like what he had explained. A stood for the charade of selling the magic staff, while B would be successfully selling it. However, since the actual auction failed, young Master Han instantly adjusted the plan, such that the smokescreen of plan A became the successful sale, and the charade of selling the magic staff turned into reality. So, what do we do now? Brother Assist asked. If Utopian magic staff truly got auctioned off, then the buyer is really strange. Why isn't the buyer anxious to get such top-grade equipment in their hands? Young Master Han wondered. Did you suspect that it's a sham? With how skeptical Brother Assist was toward others, he was already suspecting the person tasked with buying the magic staff to be stashing it away for himself while claiming that he had failed to win the bid for it. Since that man has told a lie once, I am of course inclined to suspect him a little, young Master Han said. Still, the fact that Vastlushness entrusted this task to him should mean that he's someone she can trust. Brother Assist reasoned. HMPH. This isn't the first time she has misjudged a person's character. Young Master Han scoffed. Brother Assist naturally knew that young Master Han was talking about Silver Moon. Vast Lushness had truly made a huge blunder by trusting that detestable scumbag before Silver Moon. Young Master Han suddenly furrowed his brows when he uttered that name. Did you think of something? Brother Assist hurriedly asked. Plenty. Let me hear them. Version 1. That guy's working together with Southern Lone Blade's team. Everything is progressing just as they've planned, and they're using this method to loot Vast Lushness's magic staff. If that's really what has happened, then I'll have to see them in a new light, for they'll truly be a promising gang of larcenists. Unfortunately, seeing how those two rascals from Southern Lone Blade's team are still staking the auction house like a pair of hawks, I reckon that they're stagnating at the level of criminals that go about their business plainly fighting and killing for loot. There's no way that they could think up of such a clever method to take off with the magic staff. I think you're the one not showing promise by not committing larceny. Brother Assist cried out to himself. Version 2. Silver Moon was once part of the abolished past deeds, so our buyer could of course be considered as an acquaintance of Silver Moon. Meaning, there's a possibility that this entire situation was Silver Moon's orchestration. First, he hired Southern Lone Blade's bunch to hunt down Vast Lushness for her magic staff, creating a situation which resulted in her letting go of the magic staff like this. Even if he didn't end up with the staff, he'd still manage to swindle out a tidy sum. What's even more amazing is how Southern Lone Blade's gang might fail this assignment as a corollary. Those larcenists must be obligated to pay a recompense if they fail to deliver on their assignment, mustn't they? Hey, obtaining the magic staff and getting compensated, that's two birds with one stone. How brilliant. Still, wouldn't it be too huge a heavenly injustice if a scumbag like Silver Moon managed to come up with such a wonderful ploy? You're truly wasting your heavenly given talent by not running this act of duplicity. Brother Assist cried out to himself again. As for version 3, it's a spur of the moment greed. That man suddenly desired that magic staff, so he crafted that light to take off with it. That's probably what the average player would do, young Master Han said. So, which one is it? What's Vast Lushness' take on this? Brother Assist asked. Her? I think she has already made up her mind to trust that man fully. That's probably true. There's no way she'd entrust this job to that man if she doesn't have that level of trust in him to begin with. Is her life story so much of a tragedy that she'll be betrayed by those she trusts at every turn? Let's go to the auction house, young Master Han recommended. Auction house? Brother Assist was baffled. That guy's at the auction house, young Master Han explained. If he's there, is he looking for a chance to retrieve the magic staff in secret? Brother Assist asked. Vast Lushness claimed that he's there to make up for his blunder by locating the buyer and convincing the person to sell the item to him in exchange for an exorbitant sum, young Master Han said. Has Wounds made any discovery on his end? Brother Assist suddenly asked. Do they know each other? Young Master Han deflected the question with his very own. We don't recognize him, either, Brother Assist said. Vast Lushness making her way over as well. The auction house was rather crowded right now. This was the time when players like Goofy, who adhere to a very reasonable gaming schedule, would call it a day. These were players that did not have the time to head over to the Peddler's Street or other player-created marketplaces to set up a shop or hawk goods, so they would simply collect their harvest for the day and put it up on sale at the auction house, all along taking a gander at what else was up for sale. For a time, there was plenty of human traffic at the auction house, with many busying themselves before the various auction panels inside. The distribution NPC was also welcoming the arrival of one of the busiest times of the day as players queued before it at this period. However, the system would only pass over the items to the purchasers themselves. The line naturally progressed smoothly since it would not make any mistakes in the process. The only ones having a hard time were Glue and Flame Cinched Clothes. Currently, they were struggling as they kept watch of the distribution NPC. Their eyes stared fixedly at the items being passed by the NPC to the player's hands with lightning speed. They would get visibly excited whenever they saw some staff-like equipment, but would quickly deflate once they realized that it was not the item they were waiting for upon closer inspection. Because this was a Vermo, the outward appearance was very important. Hence, Every item in the auction house would be displayed for all to see. These two had already committed to memory the utopian magic staff's appearance, but it was just unfortunate that neither of them had yet to see this item appear before their eyes. The two were having a hard time with the task at hand, yet it was War Without Wounds who was truly making them feel exasperated. With the increase in the flow of people coming and going in the auction house, his hunting ground had increased as well, and this served to reinvigorate him. Currently, he was no longer showing even a shred of concern on what the distribution NPC was doing, only casually glancing at it from time to time, showing a fierce expression whenever he saw the two men look at him. Why isn't he taking note of the distribution NPC? Flame-Singed Clothes found this to be strange. Even if he were intentionally acting this way, he should be focusing on the actual task at hand at such a crucial moment, but they only saw him continuing to act so lackadaisically by wholly ignoring the equipment being retrieved. HMPH. Big South is right, that guy's here just to throw us off with his antics, Glue sneered. But during such a time, Flame-Singed Clothes was saying even as he kept a close eye on the many goods exchanging hands. Look at that one. Glue nudged Flame-Singed Clothes. Flame-Singed Clothes followed the direction Glue was gesturing and spotted a dazed priest, whose eyes were listlessly watching the exchange between the distribution NPC and the players. Did you see that? That person's the real one assigned to watch the NPC for them. HMPH. Did they think we won't notice just because they found an unfamiliar face to do the job? That's too naive. Glue laughed mirthlessly. The instant he finished that line, they saw several players walk out from the brush and stand right before that person. The two men were startled to find that these players were Vast Lushness, Young Master Han, and Brother Assist. Why would all these players step out right now? Could the situation have changed? The two men were puzzled. Chapter 577, The Current Circumstance. Big South, there are suddenly more people. The two men had sent Southern Lone Blade a message the moment something unexpected occurred. What? That priest from Thousand Miles Drunk's mercenary group, Vast Lushness, and even Brother Assist, we can see them right now, Glue informed. Have they spotted you guys? Southern Lone Blade asked. It's probably just a matter of time. Reckoning that it was inevitable for them to enter the three's sights, Glue and Flame-Singed Clothes were already mentally preparing themselves for the coming confrontation. This time, they would not let them get the upper hand in the eventual verbal exchange, just like what War Without Wounds had done. That was the thought the two men had as they secretly drafted lines in their mind, coming up with a selection of degrading words that would appropriately convey their contempt. They waited for that bunch of players to come crowding around them. In the end, they only saw that group go to a corner to whisper something among themselves. Sharing a somber expression, they never once spared the two men a glance. Forget it. Let it remain sold since it's already sold. It's not really a loss since it got such a high price. Vast Lushness was persuading this other priest to dispel his thought of buying back the utopian magic staff. This was when it became apparent that the man was not truly committed to this idea, as he easily gave up upon hearing her dissuade him. Young Master Han and Brother Assist did not comment on this and simply observed his every move and word from the sidelines. The man did not notice their intense gazes on him at first, but as soon as he did, he was sufficiently nonplussed. Why are neither of you saying a word after coming all the way here? Vast Lushness was wondering just why the two men looked so enigmatic right now. What else can we say now that the situation has come to this? Forget it. Let's just take our money and leave. Young Master Han replied. Once the priest heard this, he pulled out a large sack of gold coins from his dimensional pocket and handed it over to Vast Lushness. The two men exchanged glances. This was one of the methods the two had come up with to test this person. Such a large sum of gold coins was not something anyone could come into possession easily. While this game let players make purchases of in-game items with real-world currency via the trade exchange, there was no way for them to exchange real-world money for actual in-game currency directly. There were players who had thought to sell gold coins like it was a tradable good over at the trade exchange, but the system rejected such transactions. While there were rumors of officials thinking of allowing the inclusion of gold coins as part of the allowed products on the trade exchange, the fact remained that such measures had yet to be implemented. That was why the current player base, no matter how well off they were in real life, was unable to convert the money they had into gold coins easily and relied on the very troublesome method of buying equipment at the trade exchange through resale, instead. However, with everyone chipping in to ensure the successful procurement of the magic staff at the auction house, a sum of over 30,000 gold coins was reached. It would be impossible, even for someone like Svelte Dancer, to pull out so many gold coins right away, so if this person had truly used this chance to pocket the staff for himself, a portion of the gold coins should already be in Vastlushness's hands. The fact he was able to produce this sack of gold coins out more or less proved his innocence. Perhaps, he has made prior arrangements for it. Brother Assist privately messaged young Master Han. Prior arrangements? We only gathered the gold at about 6 p.m. today. No one had a clue then on how much gold we would be able to raise, and the final bid for the auction's item is even more impossible to know in advance, young Master Han refuted. So, if we count the gold coins and confirm that the amount is still the same, then this man's innocence is more or less proven, Brother Assist said. Take a look at her. She has no intentions of counting it at all, young Master Han remarked dryly. It was exactly as what he had said. Vastlushness took the sack and stuffed it into her dimensional pocket in a single smooth motion. She even patted this priest consolingly. Let's call everyone over and return their coins to them now, Vastlushness suggested. This should have been done the moment the transaction had cleared, but young Master Han's revelation before had caused everyone to disperse and go about their separate ways, thus, they had not managed to do this at all earlier. Haha. This works, too. Brother Assist privately messaged young Master Han once more. They had a concise account of all the gold coins they had gathered earlier, and since the final bid bounced back, this meant the amount they had now should be the same as it was before, so doing it like this would then achieve the same result as manually counting it. Young Master Han was presently scrutinizing the man's reactions. He saw him show the slightest bit of fear at the mention of returning the gold coins to their owners, but that momentary fear was quickly overwritten by embarrassment at once. It was apparent that he was so preoccupied with buying the utopian magic staff back that he had forgotten about everyone else, and upon realizing that his failure would be exposed in front of everyone in such a fashion, it had left him feeling utterly ashamed. Young Master Han shook his head and replied to Brother Assist. Seeing how this guy is acting like a turtle hiding in its shell, I doubt that he's playing such a dirty trick on us. He could be faking it. Being far more skeptical, Brother Assist was still injudiciously monitoring the priest. HMPH. He's just a lily-livered fool. There's no need to waste more time on him. Young Master Han had already concluded it. What do you mean? Having failed to snatch the final bid, he attempted to put everything back on track by buying the magic staff back before anyone found out. Isn't that because he's not brave enough to face his failures? If he were truly resolved to salvage this situation with this method, would Vastlushness be able to persuade him otherwise with just a few words? His actions from the very start already telegraphed just how much he wants to run away from all this. I believe that we'll see him hiding under the table when everything is revealed once we return everyone's gold coins. After young Master Han sent this message to Brother Assist, he swiftly addressed Vastlushness. We won't be going with you as we still have something else to take care of over there. Vastlushness knew that these men were not about to let Southern Lone Blade get away scot-free. Technically speaking, it was her equipment Southern Lone Blade was planning to loot, so she simply could not fathom why they had such a deep grudge for the man's gang. It was evident that this was not all just for her sake. In any case, she did not pry any further and just took out 400 gold coins from the sack and divided the amount between the two before leaving with the other priest. The priest was visibly reluctant, and it was exactly as how young Master Han had said. He truly did not wish to face the music. Sending the pair off, young Master Han turned to wave in a different direction. You two, get over here. Gloon Flame Singed Clothes, who had not received the attention that they had been expecting right from the get-go, were just starting to feel dejected when young Master Han finally turned to address them. Are you calling us? Flame Singed Clothes could not help but respond, asking both the priest and Glue at the same time. Enough of your nonsense, quick get over here. With haste. Young Master Han ordered. Flame Singed Clothes involuntarily wanted to dash over, but Glue held him back with an eye roll. Flame-singed clothes immediately simmered in his guilt. He had inadvertently lost his composure again. How embarrassing. If you've got something to say, come over yourself, Glue calmly called out. Young Master Han and Brother Assist made their way to them. Feeling that he was holding the upper hand in this conversation, Glue was somewhat delighted with himself. Naturally, he did not dare to be too careless, either, and carefully considered what the opposing party might be planning to do and how he should respond to it. All the while, he was actively relaying what was happening to Southern Lone Blade in real time. "Where's War Without Wounds?" young Master Han asked the moment he was face to face with the two larcenists. The two unanimously turned to look where War Without Wounds was. Currently, the warrior was projecting a cool front by leaning against a column beside an auction panel with his arms folded before him as he chatted up a lady browsing through the auction interface. "Thanks," young Master Han expressed. He then made his way over to Warrior with Brother Assist without a backward glance. Glue and flame-singed clothes were rooted to the spot. "Was that it? What was that all about?" Southern Lone Blade was still inquiring in detail just what those men had come to do, but even he was left stupefied after Glue reported to him what they had come to ask. "Just concentrate on the task at hand and ignore them." He felt that they could not keep watching over the opposing party's actions like they were minding an egg being cooked. From the roller coaster ride of emotions Glue and flame-singed clothes had experienced, it was possible that this was an attack on their psyche. Since there was no way for any player to engage in combat in the safe zone, forcing the two larcenists to the brink of mental collapse was the only offensive method they could use. Southern Lone Blade even wondered if he should get someone else to take over the task. Flame-singed clothes was the recipient of plenty of abuses in their many confrontations, so his mental state was admittedly on the fragile side. Therefore, he could easily end up getting distracted. War Without Wounds was currently throwing his name out proudly, telling the lady just how observant, vigilant, and capable he was, that he could take on a group all by himself. That was when he heard a cold voice from behind him. "Can you stop fucking bragging?" War Without Wounds quickly turned his head over, only to see young Master Han and Brother Assist standing behind him. He immediately shook his head resolutely. "Who are you two? I don't know you guys." He did not wish for the two to spoil his flirting stratagem. Having spent a whole night, this was the only lady that looked to be responding positively to his bragging. In the end, when he turned around, the lady was already pouting her lips, hissing, "Braggart." The lady then turned to leave. He did not notice people creeping up on him. How was that even observant or vigilant? "Babe, let me explain. It's because we're in a safe zone, and the system prevents people from exuding any sort of killing intent. That's the only reason I didn't sense them coming up to me. As long as we walk out of here, you'll realize that everything I said is true." "Yes, it's the truth. Why don't we find somewhere and test this out?" "Hey, don't leave." "Hey." War Without Wounds was a baby leg that had no movement speed to speak of, and that lady happened to be a thief. As such, her figure disappeared into the distance in no time, only leaving him with the look of derision from those in the auction house. Everyone, who had heard him yell all that, was now thinking how shameless he was for even uttering all that. "What are you two doing here?" War Without Wounds was agitated. Just as he was about to potentially find success after a whole night of effort, these two just happened to have such a timely arrival. They were even floating right behind him like ghosts. It was really too much. "Comrades, we're currently in a serious situation." Young Master Han did not even give a hoot about War Without Wounds' indignation. "What?" Ultimately, War Without Wounds quickly shifted his focus onto the task at hand. His ability to shrug off the haze of failure within a few seconds was evidence just how he was used to failing in his hunt for the ladies. The magic staff really got sold, and the buyer had yet to appear, young Master Han informed. "That's nothing. We're keeping watch here. How are they gonna run off with it?" War Without Wounds said. "Is that so? Well, I feel a lot safer now that you've said that." "Keep watch, then." "Brother Assist, we're leaving," young Master Han said. Wait a minute." War Without Wounds immediately realized that something had gone wrong the moment he saw how satisfied young Master Han looked. He swiftly went to stop the two men from leaving, asking after he had carefully pondered on the situation, "Is he not going to turn up for 7 days? It's good that you're mentally prepared for such an eventuality," Young Master Han sarcastically replied. That won't do. War Without Wounds was instantly stressed out. Must I stand guard here for the next 7 days without any activity? Which is why I told you that the situation is severe. You're the one who said that it's nothing, young Master Han remarked dryly. Ahem. Actually, if you give me a lady companion, it won't really be that difficult to keep watch here for 7 days, War Without Wounds proposed. Trust me, there's not a single woman in this world that will be willing to accompany you for 7 days. You gotta be realistic, you can't always keep living in that fantasy world of yours. Young Master Han solemnly said. Scram! War Without Wounds bellowed. Are you saying that we are truly going to keep watch here for 7 days straight just like Southern Lone Blade's team? Brother Assist asked. Chapter 578, Instigating the Crowd. The three men involuntarily turned to look at flame-singed clothes and glue. While they might be larcenists, the two men were very loyal to their comrades and dedicated to accomplishing their given tasks. They were truly model workers when compared to War Without Wounds. Even now, retrieving the goods took up 70% of the two's attention, while the remaining 30% was on the three men from Young Master's elite. Their control was perfect in every sense. The way their bodies exuded an effortless ease made it seem as if this were second nature to them. Only when they realized that the three men were looking at them did a sliver of panic fleet across the duo's expression. Look at them and look at yourselves. Young Master Han would of course not let an opportunity for an on-site lecture go. They were all members of their respective small teams. Yet Young Master's elite was nowhere near as united as Southern Lone Blade's 7-man team. Their members would put the team before themselves, with none nitpicking over their individual losses. Meanwhile, Young Master's elite comprised experts that would never back down from a fight, yet the moment they came across something tedious, each would prefer to shirk all sorts of responsibility, and they were all more than willing not to do anything about it. Enough with all that useless chatter. Just tell us what we must do now, War Without Wounds said. I doubt any of you would be willing to stake out this place like them, Young Master Han said. Instead, would you be willing yourself? War Without Wounds cleverly flipped the script on him. Young Master Han dodged the question, but it was clear what everyone's stance regarding this was. None of the three was willing. Royal God Call and Sword Demon were not the type to waste so much time on such an endeavor, either. There was no need to even mention Goofy as there was no way to guarantee that he would be online for long. How about we take turns? Brother Assist suggested. What's the point of us keeping an eye on them? Young Master Han asked. Kill them, of course. Brother Assist answered. If neither of them leaves, will you be able to do anything to them? Brother Assist was stumped for words, knowing what Young Master Han meant. What they'd needed was more than just keeping an eye on the magic staff's appearance. They must ensure that they would be able to kill the other party as well. There would be no point in keeping an eye on them otherwise, for Southern Lone Blade's team might even turn the knife toward them the moment they stepped out of the auction house. At the end of the day, this was the crux as to why they were in such a bind. Both parties were stuck waiting here, but while Southern Lone Blade's gang was camping out the auction house for the buyer with the clear goal of making a profit and getting a reward, could the same be said for the members of Young Master's elite? They were here to play a game, for them to while their time away, and possibly for 7 days at that, here at the auction house with the 7 larcenists. Forget about the boredom, just the experience points and gold coins they would stand to miss out on was tremendous already. It was simply not worth the loss. What about your original plan? With the utopian magic staff truly getting sold off, how will we deal with such a situation? Brother Assist asked. If this happened as per normal, Bluey's and his lot would be very aggrieved, and given their personality, they'd most likely, and extremely diligently, keep watch over here in hopes of snatching back the magic staff, probably even going as far as to loot it off the buyer's corpse if they had to. They would likely gladly volunteer to do this menial work, but alas, their attention right now is invested in that spineless fool. Vast Lushness is sure to be lenient on the man and will definitely not mind that this happened. With that being the case, this matter will be laid to rest right then and there. Actually, who would be willing to spend so much time pursuing such bullshit, anyway? No one would be willing to impair their personal relations. As long as she says the word, they'll all be happy to call it quits and go about their businesses without much of a fuss. Reason young Master Han, brother assist and warrior without wounds, thought about how Bluise's lot had acted before and concurred with young Master Han's assessment. If an outsider had been obtained the magic staff right from the very start, those men would surely have tried all sorts of methods to get it back. In such an instance, Southern Lone Blade's gang would have been seen as competitors for the magic staff, and both parties would have butted heads until the bitter end. There was even a chance that young Master Han and the others would not have to step in. Unfortunately, the current situation was as how young Master Han had described it. That foolish bidding master had become the focus of Vastlushness's comrades' collective resentment. All it took was Vastlushness expressing her stance on the matter, and everything would be as good as settled. Hey, why don't we just leave it be? Brother Assist hesitated for a moment before asking. Considering the situation that they were in, they would not really incur any sort of loss in every sense of the word if they took the initiative to wash their hands off this, and they could even save time doing so. They did not really have any deep-seated grudge against Southern Lone Blade and Company, to the point where young Master Han's gang needed to wipe them off the face of the earth. It was Gufei who was the one who had dragged them here to lend Vastlushness a hand in the first place, and now that even the woman at the helm had decided to withdraw from this matter, there was simply no rhyme or reason for them to continue wasting their time and effort on this. That's not an unwise decision, either. Young Master Han nodded. So, shall we take our leave? Brother Assist asked. Having wasted so much of our effort and time, it is too disgusting if we don't make them bleed at least a little. As young Master Han said this, he made his way over to Flame-Cinched Clothes and Glue, War Without Wounds, and Brother Assist hurried right behind him. Where's your boss? Young Master Han asked right away when he came over. The two ignored him. They were under Southern Lone Blade's orders to pay no heed to these men and concentrate on the task at hand. Make way. Flame-Cinched Clothes barked at young Master Han. Someone was retrieving goods off the distribution NPC at this time, and young Master Han happened to be blocking his view. Young Master Han turned around, extending a hand to the line of players preparing to retrieve their equipment. Everyone, stop. The crowd swept their gazes over to him suspiciously even as they continued to line up and retrieve their goods. They were all ignoring him. Young Master Han's actual purpose was to call attention to himself, and he did not really care if they listened to him or not. Seeing everyone's glancing over, he quickly waved his hand and gestured at Flame-Cinched Clothes and Glue. You all have seen these two brothers loitering here for a long time. Yeah? Do you guys know who they are? To be bold enough to retrieve your equipment at such a time like this, do you guys not want your equipment at all? The crowd froze, while Glue and Flame-Cinched Clothes became all the more nervous as they heard young Master Han continue. Don't blame me for not warning everyone. These two here are professional larcenists that relieve players of their dropped equipment upon death. They're currently searching for a target and will be keeping their eye on said player the moment he or she steps outside. You guys should think over this yourself. Fuck, don't you venomously slander us. Glue came running out shouting. That's right. Everyone, ignore this man. We're not here to rob anyone. Please collect the equipment you've bought in peace. Flame-Cinched Clothes came over to lend his voice as well. Neither party produced any sort of evidence, but such a matter had always been an issue of belief. Even if no one believed it, young Master Han's words had already caused quite a few players to hesitate, and it no longer mattered what Glue or Flame-Cinched Clothes said. These two men could immediately tell that they needed something even more convincing. And Glue reacted far quicker as he immediately called out to young Master Han. There's no need to go overboard by making a tasteless joke like that. Coming up with an excuse at this time would not salvage the situation. After all, there was no evidence that they were here to rob people, so Glue intentionally acted more relaxed, making it seem as if they were all no strangers to one another, hoping to lead the crowd into believing that this was no more than a prank between friends. This proved to be rather effective as quite a few players' expressions visibly lightened, with some even chuckling along. In the end, it was young Master Han's icy tone which cut through the crowd again. Since you're not here to rob people, why does it matter if anyone retrieved their equipment or not? Flame-Cinched Clothes and Glue were in a daze, even as they howled in their hearts that they had been tricked. Sure enough, if this were not an attempted robbery and if they were truly friends playing pranks on one another, The pair should not have gotten flustered to the point of explaining anything to the crowd. Anyone would see it as a joke the moment they did not retrieve their equipment after being tricked like this. Why would it be any of their business if these players picked up their equipment or not? Only real robbers would be so unnerved that they would seek to explain themselves to those around them to prevent their identities from getting exposed, or grow nervous when people stopped retrieving their equipment from the distribution NPC. The two men had completely fallen into the trap set by young Master Han, and their attempt to assure the crowd became the best explanation. Glue's method of pretending to be friends with young Master Han was quite a good solution, but it was unfortunate that he had used it far too late. The crowd had already seen their initial alarm and panic upon getting exposed. Many of the players queuing in an orderly manner to get their goods began to back away, and this was one of those instances where all it took was one player taking the lead for all the others to follow suit blindly. Everybody began to discuss this with one another, and the slower players listened to the more quick-witted players' reasoning. Soon, almost half of the players that had been queuing left, and some players remained, not because they were skeptical about it, rather, they knew that what they were picking up was nothing exceptional, and if these two were to choose them as target for something cheap, it would simply be an insult to their profession as robbers. The news of two potential robbers searching for a target quickly spread throughout the auction house, and soon, the two men found themselves being surrounded by an enraged horde of players. Even if the two of them were merely framed, the fact remained that they could hardly give a convincing explanation in defense. This was especially since they were truly robbers. If not for them being in a safe zone, which indiscriminately prevented players from having any form of physical contact with one another, there was a high probability of them dying under a stampede. Young Master Han, who was comfortably onlooking the crowd's impassioned anger from outside the encirclement, said to Brother Assist and War Without Wound standing next to him, "We can't possibly let them get off easily, can we?" "Oh, yes, yes, yes." The two wiped sweat off their foreheads. They only realized now how lucky they were to be in the same mercenary group as young Master Han. At least, they would not have to go up against such a villainous opponent. What he had just accomplished, which was unmasking Flame-Singed Clothes and Glue's shady identities to the masses, was theoretically simple and straightforward, but the difficulty lay on how he had convinced the crowd to take his side, instigating them into a frenzy that then proceeded to mob the two. Glue and Flame-Singed Clothes pitifully bore with the endless spittle from the people around them as they reported what had happened to Southern Lone Blade. "Ah, that's too careless of me." Southern Lone Blade slapped his thigh viciously. This incident would cause them to become the laughing stock within their circle. For professionals in such a reviled line of work like larceny, were they not tempting fate by sharing the same roof with those that knew their true identities and calmly setting up surveillance so publicly? There was nowhere to hide in a place like the auction house, so blatantly watching players collect their equipment was risky enough, and now that they had people that knew of their identities in the same building, they had actually not realized the danger they were in still. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Southern Lone Blade slapped himself twice more, for he knew that this was a lapse of judgment on his part as the leader. "Run!" Southern Lone Blade ordered the two men. Even someone who barely knew what was going on could tell that neither man could continue their surveillance any longer. Going by the front entrance would surely result in their deaths, and there was no guarantee that Southern Lone Blade and the others would be able to hold off the anger of so many people even if they came to rescue them, much less when Goofy's gang was still around. Fortunately, they had long prepared a method of escape, and it was even Glue who had given them this suggestion. Windchaser's emblem. After being in contact with Yeezia, Glue came to know of the existence of this item, as well as the method of obtaining it, and how effective its teleportation skill was when used as an escape tool. However, even though Southern Lone Blade and his men were all larcenists, their low-profile existence meant that they would hardly engage in picking outside of their assignment. While they had come into contact with bounty missions, none of them had accumulated the necessary 100 bounty missions. However, now that they had a purpose for doing so, it only took them an entire day and night of hard work to get their hands on two of this, which they then proceeded to hand over to Flame-Singed Clothes and Glue. Southern Lone Blade originally assumed that there would be an ambush waiting for them outside the auction house, so there might not be any chance for these two players keeping watch of the place to get away safely, which was why they had thought of making use of the Windchaser's emblem's teleportation skill as an instantaneous escape. Flame-cinched clothes and glue, of course, knew that there was no longer any point in remaining here, and the moment they saw Southern Lone Blade's order, they each tapped their emblems and disappeared in a flash of white light. This teleportation was considered as the system's ability and not a skill any character possessed, so they were usable even in this safe zone where any and all skills were restricted from use. This was something that Southern Lone Blade's team had already tested. Where are they? The moment this horde of players that were happily mobbing the two robbers saw them disappear from sight, suspicion filled their hearts as they hesitantly scattered. Alas! Now that no one could find the two men, a shadow remained in everyone's hearts. Everyone looked at one another, each finding the others to be suspicious except for themselves. In that moment, aside from those collecting goods, which were deemed to be of little worth, no one else came forward to retrieve their equipment. Brother Assist could tell at a glance that this was still well within young Master Han's calculation. There might not be any long-term repercussions when the knowledge of this incident spread, but those in the auction house would surely be a little more cautious in the immediate future. For the buyer of the Utopian magic staff, there was no way that he or she could not retrieve it, but they would surely be on their guard when doing so, which would nationally increase the difficulty Southern Lone Blade's team would be facing in doing their assignments. Time to go. Noticing that quite a few players had transferred their suspicions on him now, young Master Han quickly instructed Brother Assist and Warrior Without Wounds to depart. The human mind was truly a frightening thing, and there was bound to be people out there who would suspect young Master Han and the others of colluding in such an elaborate scheme with those two players from before. In a flash of white light, flame-cinched clothes and glue soon found themselves in Beishi City's bounty assignment hall. With those angry faces they were facing moments before gone, they gave an involuntary sigh of relief, even as they thought of what a treasure Windchaser's emblem was. The two picked up a bounty mission along the way and figured that, since they had nothing to do at the moment, they could first complete a bounty so as to maintain the usability of the emblem's teleportation. Where's your target? The two exchanged the serial number of their bounties and the corresponding coordinates. Not really near. Let's do yours first. Glue suggested. They had been completed the bounty missions as a group the entire night, as there was too much risk soloing bounty missions. The two were talking to each other when they pulled open the door to leave the bounty assignment hall. Right away, they caught sight of the two players leaning next to the double doors, basking in the sun as they chatted. They had just casually glanced over, but that one glance had caused Glue and Flame-cinched clothes to be petrified instantly. Both of them wished to turn tail and run, yet their feet felt as if they were rooted to the ground as they simply could not move. The two men who were idling chatting also caught sight of the two the instant they left the building, and a single punch and kick came flying without another word. Flame-cinched clothes and Glue dropped to the ground right by the stone steps outside the door in the next second. One man grabbed a hold of the two larcenists, while the other actually poked his head behind the door for a quick look before gazing at the two men with a sigh of regret. Why are there just the two of you? Where are the others? Glue and Flame-cinched clothes felt like crying, yet no tears would come out. They were not about to say a word even if they were beaten to an inch of their life. You've all learned how to use the Windchaser's emblem, I see. It looks like you guys also progress with the times. Did you guys learn it from watching me? Shouldn't you guys use your brains to realize that, since I know how to use it, why will I let you guys use this method to escape? Goofy was squatting before the two men as he lectured them. Why waste your breath? Just kill them already. Eternal Dominion was a little impatient. He was in the middle of consulting Goofy about a problem he was facing when the two interrupted by appearing before them. He was still waiting to hear his answer. Do it. Goofy waved his hand and stood up. Eternal Dominion stomped on the two men and killed them with a swift blow each. Stepping over their corpses, which had turned into white lights, he said, continue. Chapter 579. Bury them with money. Flame-cinched clothes stood staring at the open sky in the Mage Academy of Beishi City. This was not Linian City where leaves dancing with a cool breeze could match the melancholia in his heart. Instead, it was white dust, unique to this region, that was in the breeze in this city. He stared into the distance with dazed eyes, and the dust quickly blurred his vision, causing the man to tear up freely. His eyes were hurting, and so was his heart. It was not too long ago that the Mage Flame-Singed Clothes was among the 10 great adepts. Because of the sensitive nature of his profession, which required him to maintain a low profile, he had never once revealed the depths of his skills. Still, he was proud of his achievement, but this sudden blow had truly been too quick and far too ferocious. In Lori City, Flame-Singed Clothes' heart was aglow with pride as he held off a host of experts in a corner of a valley when he linked 2 palatial balefires into a single boundary. Alas, Parallel World's #1 mage, Drifting, used his icy mirage to get past his wall of flames, and the man's magnificent blossoming crimson lotus explosion had sent him turtling behind Southern Lone Blade's shield, not daring to poke his head out. It was in that moment that tragedy began. When that was over, he had ended up killing himself by sliding into his sea of flames in Linshui City. In Xiaota City, he burned his own comrade, Blackwater, to death, earning him that 1 park point that led Gufei's men to him. Later, when they were lost in the thick mist of Xiaota City, Flame-Singed Clothes, who had lost his spirit to escape the fate of being hunted, became the first to fall as Eternal Dominion came out of nowhere and clutched his throat, dying with a belly full of spite in the end. After that enraged boss incident over at Xiaota City, they heard that there were plenty of players who died that received recompense, yet none of the 7 brothers saw their names come up. Originally considered among the ranks of the 10 great adepts at level 41, most players would feel disheartened after losing 3 levels in such a short span of time, but this was not the case for Flame-Singed Clothes. He might not have his levels, but he still had his career. Leaving for another city far away from Gufei, he diligently and tirelessly grinded up his level again for a time until he managed to level up twice, only a bare step away from level 40. However, everything had burst like a bubble in the sun in the blink of an eye. Level 38. Flame-Singed Clothes was back to the same state he was after he had gotten slain thrice that time. This time, with the wind in his eyes, Flame-Singed Clothes stood at the entrance to the Mage Academy, no longer having any idea where he should go. I got slain. Southern Lone Blade received this message from Glue. How did that happen? Southern Lone Blade quickly asked. 1,000 Miles Drunk and Eternal Dominion were waiting for us outside the Bounty Assignment Hall. They've seen through our attempt at using the Windchaser's emblem to escape, Glue reported. Southern Lone Blade thought himself as clever and crafty, someone who acted carefully, but when it came to brilliant schemes, Gufei's bunch was always one step ahead of him. He was no match for the strength and intelligence of their opponents, so how would they be able to eke out a win? We've been busy this whole day, let's all take a rest first. Southern Lone Blade really had no idea what to say. None of them had slept a wink since last night because they were all busy grinding out the Windchaser's emblem. They each took turns to take a short 2-hour nap sprawled on the tables of a tavern, each making their preparations at the last minute, all for this battle to find their confidence back. Unfortunately, the result was still the same. They had disastrously lost on every front. Southern Lone Blade wanted to message his team, saying, "The battle has just begun, let's not give up, everyone," but he could not find it in him to type it out because even himself had difficulties believing what he wanted to say. Southern Lone Blade was also slowly losing his self-confidence at this point. The members of Southern Lone Blade's team, hidden in the various corners of the city, each began to walk to a spawn point to log out. Patty Scented Pastures happened to be at the Mage Academy, so he spotted Flame-Singed Clothes standing right outside the entrance, facing the incoming breeze to the point of being unable to open his eyes. Patty Scented Pastures had no idea what to say, so he just patted the man on his back before he proceeded to log out with a soft sigh. Southern Lone Blades logged off. Even though they were enemies, Brother Assist was still a friend of Southern Lone Blade, and he immediately spread the news when his name dimmed on the list. No way. Gufei was very disappointed. He had been camping out by the Bounty Assignment Hall and was waiting to catch the big fish. Southern Lone Blade was well deserving of the villain title for being able to exchange a few rounds with Gufei, yet the latter had sent the former to prison by borrowing the combat strength of an NPC guard the first time. He was uninvolved the second time they crossed paths, while the third time was Eternal Dominion's doing. Gufei, who had never once had the chance to deal a satisfying cut to the man, had been waiting for his chance to do just that this time. Eternal Dominion was no exception as well. Honestly, he doubted that he would earn any remuneration for the 2 players he had just stomped to death, since the target he needed was Southern Lone Blade. As the man was no longer online, he simply had no means to conduct his business anymore. Let's go. When the 2 martial arts practitioners realized that there was no fight to be had, and that it was about time for them to log off as well, they made their way to the safe zone, too, leaving just young Master Han and the others to conclude what happened today elsewhere. Sword Demon and Royal God Call were a little dispirited, as losing sight of Southern Lone Blade respectively was their only contribution for today. They had no idea what had happened to the rest, making them feel as if they were bit characters in this story. From the message Fast Lushness's side had sent them, the situation was more or less resolved to the satisfaction of all parties involved. It was just as young Master Han had expected. After Vast Lushness clearly stated that she did not mind what had happened to the magic staff, no one else really had anything else to say regarding the matter. It was unavoidable for the priest that had lied about successfully making the purchase to suffer a harsh bout of admonishment from Bluey's, but given how everything had passed, a few rounds of liquor down their gullets were all it took for the whole lot of them to begin enjoying themselves. In truth, Vast Lushness was the only person who was truly affected by the loss of the Utopian magic staff, so how could the others stay unhappy for long? Bluey's men organized for them to go grinding, but Vast Lushness excused herself by saying that she was a little tired and did not wish to join them. Sakura Sakamuni was obviously the most elated when he saw how Bluey's got rejected. By the time they all walked away, the hunter had bounded over to Vast Lushness excitedly. "Lushness, let's go questing." He thought that the haze was over, and that his blissful life was about to begin anew. "I'm tired, I wanna sit here for a bit." "You guys go ahead." Vast Lushness rejected. "Then, I'll accompany you," Sakura Sakamuni said, leaning in eagerly. "There's no need for that. I'll be fine here having Svilti with me." Vast Lushness rejected again. He had more to say, but then he saw Svelte Dancer slice off a corner of the table with her dagger and pull out a coin pouch to pay for the damage before saying through bared teeth, "Don't be annoying. Quickly go play by yourself." Sakura Sakamuni pulled his neck back. In his eyes, Svelte Dancer was far more frightening than Goofy. This was because people like him who were casually acquainted with Goofy knew he would not really strike his friends viciously no matter what happened, but this lady was different. He reckoned that she did not even consider his lot to be any sort of friends at all. What if he were to disobey her? Did she not just demonstrate what would be his likely outcome with what she had done to the table? "Then, you two, take care." Sakura Sakamuni expressed his concern before hurriedly bringing all his comrades to get out of dodge. Svelte Dancer was a beauty with filled pockets. She was originally a top-grade lady the members of Forever in Flowers could only dream about, but considering her viciousness, everybody felt that their lives were more important. It was important for them to have fun and not feel tortured when flirting. "Aside from Drunk Bro, there's no one else out there who can handle this sort of chick," Fireball boasted. He made it sound as if Goofy's ability to handle her meant he could do it himself, leading the pack of men away from the tavern while acting like an alpha. Seeing everyone leave, Vast Lushness finally shed her facade and revealed her sadness. Playing with a sack of coins in her hands, she felt a little troubled in her heart. She had gotten this sack of gold coins in exchange for her Utopian magic staff. It all amounted to 5,623 gold, 67 silver, and 14 copper coins after taking away the system imposed handling fee. It was hard to determine this as a loss since it had been sold at such a price. Even veteran gamers like Brother Assist and the others had priced the staff at 2,000 to 3,000 gold coins following the conventional assessment based on the stats it had. For it to reach such a high price, it was nationally due to the staff's uniqueness, as well as the bidding frenzy that ensued. Selling the equipment like this had actually cost more than the price of hiring someone to loot the staff off her corpse. However, all Vast Lushness could feel was just sadness right now. Losing something would often cause a person to feel nostalgic about it, especially since she had lost it while having no intention to part with it at all. The emptiness she was feeling now was definitely not something money could fill, and in order not to let the others hold a grudge, She had no choice but to put up a brave front and be merry for quite some time. Pretending all this while had left her drained. "What's the matter? You can't possibly be on the verge of tears, can you?" Only a woman would know best what another woman was thinking. Svelte Dancer naturally understood Vast Lushness's unwillingness to part with the staff. Given Svelte Dancer's personality, she would have long since killed off all those people who had bungled up this affair, but Vast Lushness was indeed someone who had been in a position of leadership before, so she behaved and acted differently from Svelte Dancer. She had moved to sit across her at this point and was now regarding her intensely. "Just kidding." Vast Lushness managed to eke out a smile. "What's there to cry about? I've gotten a hefty sum. Come, let's go shopping." The love for shopping was a woman's born nature. There were plenty of women who would use this as a way to release their emotions, so Vast Lushness wanted to have a go at it herself. "No." Svelte Dancer lifted her hand to stop the lady. "We can't leave the matter like this. We need to get that magic staff back, and I still need my revenge. We don't have any idea where that magic staff is. How are we gonna get it back?" Vast Lushness showed a bitter smile. "Aren't Southern Lone Blade's gang looking to get a hold of it? Wait till they loot it off someone, then we'll snatch it right off their hands," Svelte Dancer said. Vast Lushness stared deep into Svelte Dancer's eyes. She was not exactly close with her, but now after mixing around with the whole lot of men and with the two of them being the only female players around, it was only natural for them to get a little more familiar with each other. Svelte Dancer made this all sound so easy, and the idea behind it was overly simplified, too. "I don't think it's that simple. Miles and the others are also working on this matter, and they have nothing to show after spending the whole night on it. I heard all that they've accomplished was to kill two of their little pawns," Vast Lushness said. Gloomflame Cinched Clothes would surely be in tears if they were present to hear what she had said. They, who had once been in the ranks of the 10 great adepts, were reduced to nameless pawns behind their backs. It was fine they were referred to as pawns, but adding the little in front was just overkill. "They have no problems when it comes to fighting and killing, but honestly, when it comes to looting equipment off players, you're better off relying on Southern Lone Blade," Svelte Dancer remarked. Vast Lushness thought that what she said made sense. Every practice had their professionals. Murder and larceny were two different matters altogether, especially when talking about larceny in a game setting. Murder was no more than just violence, but larceny required patience. Thinking of how Goofy would only spend 3 hours a day playing the game, there was no way that he would be able to do this sort of specialized work no matter how competent he was. "So, what do you suggest?" Vast Lushness was of course more than happy to get back her magic staff. Still, she could not simply make sense of what Svelte Dancer was getting at after listening to her this whole time. Southern Lone Blade's team is only looting that magic staff because someone else hired them, right? They're still gonna go for it no matter who the magic staff ends up with. "How much is the other party paying?" "Let's double it and the magic staff will end up with us. Once we complete the transaction and get the magic staff, we'll kill them off as well." "How satisfying will that be?" Svelte Dancer was delighted. Vast Lushness was stunned. The closer someone got to another, the harder it was to make out the person in question. Just who is this woman? She was the top pay-to-win player in the MMO community. Why would she even get such a reputation if she did not use her money during crucial moments to make a breakthrough? This plan demonstrated the very style of a pay-to-win player like Svelte Dancer. "If I can't beat you, I'll buy you." Will this work? Vast Lushness was skeptical. Every practice had their professionals, after all. Thus, when it came to using money to pave the road, Vast Lushness felt that there was no way she would have more experience than Svelte Dancer. Of course. Are they not taking such a risky line of work all for the pursuit of fortune? The same job that ends up earning more money, do they have any reason to reject it? Svelte Dancer was bristling with confidence when she said this. "Let's give it a shot?" Vast Lushness was a little tempted. She was willing to sacrifice a bit of gold if she could get her magic staff back. With how ridiculous the price of her staff had gotten from this auction, there was a good chance that she already had twice the amount, believing that it would not be too far off if what she had earned was not enough. In the end, the two ladies contacted young Master Han and asked about Southern Lone Blade, only to learn that he had already logged off. With the plan running into roadblocks right from the start, Svelte Dancer bared her teeth and sliced another corner of the table in her annoyance. Forget it, we can't find him even if he's online. Anyway, let's send him a letter. Vastlushness said. Yes. Svelte Dancer nodded repeatedly. For them to go through all that trouble before just to draw out Southern Lone Blade's team, it clearly showed that the 7 men were not easy to locate, so writing a letter would be the most reliable way to get in contact with them. After writing the letter and sending it out, Vastlushness thought of the fact that there was no one watching the auction house right now. What if the buyer came by to retrieve the magic staff at this time? Would that not mean that she would have the chance to buy back her magic staff directly? With such a thought in mind, she dragged Svelte Dancer over to the auction house even as she considered the absurdity of the situation. She had just sold the magic staff for such an exorbitant sum, yet she was looking to buy it back with an expensive price tag again. There was no doubt that this other person would take her for a fool if this transaction were to succeed. Why do we need to stake things out here for? We've already handed the task of getting the Utopian magic staff to Southern Lone Blade. Svelte Dancer knew what Vastlushness was getting at and yawned to express her objection. Isn't it great if we can just buy it back? Vastlushness asked. If you buy it back like this, how am I gonna get my revenge on Southern Lone Blade? Svelte Dancer asked back. While helping Vastlushness get back her staff was obviously important, she too wished she could take revenge for her personal grudge as well. Vastlushness felt guilty for only thinking about herself. She had truly forgotten that Svelte Dancer had a personal grudge to avenge, and the magic staff was also a bait she wanted to use to achieve this. Forget it. Your magic staff's more important. Let's just wait here, then. Watch me bury anyone with money if they even dare to come retrieve it, Svelte Dancer declared pompously. But what if that person doesn't want to sell it even in the face of death? That was Vastlushness's biggest worry. Svelte Dancer obviously was not corrupted to the point where she believed that money was all powerful, so she knew that such a possibility existed. Ultimately, she could only sigh. Then, we'll have to commit daylight robbery. Ho! The players in the auction house immediately distanced themselves by tens of meters from the two ladies. When the two of them went straight to the distribution NPC upon entering the premises, the players present in the rumor-filled auction house were already suspicious of the pair. But no one wanted to believe that these two beautiful ladies would be related to something as shameless as larceny. This was until Svelte Dancer mentioned the word robbery. Why else would everyone not give the ladies a wide berth? Damn, how dangerous. The honeypot scheme is simply too vicious. Now that the criminals out there are conducting such intelligent crimes, it's really hard for people to be on guard against them effectively. The crowd thought to themselves. Chapter 580, Chapter 580. Looking to purchase the Utopian magic staff. Having experienced plenty of counter-encirclement skirmishes, Vastlushness's senses had essentially been honed to the point that she quickly realized the changes in the people around them. Meanwhile, Svelte Dancer was speaking with a level haughtiness that matched young Master Han's disregard for anybody listening, so she did not notice what had just occurred. She was still staring intently at the queuing players that were now hesitating to retrieve their goods, yelling at those staring fixedly at them. What are you looking over here for? Haven't you seen a beauty before? Carry on with your retrieval. Just as those words left her lips, Vastlushness promptly dragged her right out the door. They were two ladies, so most players would instinctively be more accommodating to them. None of them wanted to make any move before they clearly knew what the ladies' intention was. Were glue and flame-cinched clothes in their shoes, they would long be surrounded en masse and covered in spittle. What are we running for? Svelte Dancers had yet to realize what was amiss as they made their way out of the auction house. Your voice was too loud. The people there thought that the two of us are looking to rob someone, Vastlushness explained. Who dares? Svelte Dancer had her arms akimbo, glaring threateningly when she turned around. The gazes of more than half of the people inside were still following the two ladies, so Svelte Dancer managed to catch the bewildered suspicion in their eyes. We'll go according to your plan and wait for their reply. Vastlushness had no wish for there to be even more trouble, so she hurriedly tugged at Svelte Dancer to leave. Southern Lone Blade had already lost count of how many sleepless nights he had suffered. Ever since he began his foray in Parallel World, Southern Lone Blade had been maximizing his time gaming by staying up overnight. Compared to the other players, the hours he spent online were much longer. Today was his first time sleeping like a normal person, yet he ended up tossing and turning in his bed, unable to get a wink of sleep. He was having trouble with his assignment, and his business was at a bottleneck. This was the problem Southern Lone Blade and his comrades were entangled with right now. None of them was even in the mood to exchange goodbyes before they got offline today, which only went to show how their morale was truly at its pits. 1 magic staff, 2 magic staves. Southern Lone Blade's heart and mind had conjured images of the magic staff, as if he were counting sheep, reaching over 1,000 before he finally fell asleep. The rest of his team were also online when he logged onto Parallel World the next day. Everybody exchanged greetings and did say anything further. No one asked what was in the books today, as if everyone was walking on eggshells. Southern Lone Blade had nothing to say at the moment as well, so he went to the mailbox as per usual. He would always check his mail every day in game, as there was no way he could be online all 24 hours in a day. There would often be business that came in while he was not online. However, checking the mail daily did not mean that there would be new business every day. The few letters he looked through were all meaningless drivel. It was only when he read the letter from Dancer did he receive a huge shock, scrutinizing the letter 5 times over. If this were before, receiving a chance to do business with MMO community's #1 pay-to-win player would certainly be a cause for celebration for Southern Lone Blade's gang, which was also why he did not wish to become enemies with Dancer in the first place. A majority of players who would do business with them were pay-to-win players, and Dancer was considered to be their dream client. Now, all Southern Lone Blade could do was sigh heavily, for the letter had come too late. Given the relationship between Dancer and them, there was only one conclusion he could draw from this letter. It's a trap. It was another trap to smoke them out. Southern Lone Blade was about to delete the mail offhandedly when he abruptly stopped himself. This was a trap, but that did not mean that there was nothing he could do to take advantage of this. With that thought in mind, Southern Lone Blade quickly called the others for a meeting to relay to them in detail all about Dancer's letter. Everyone was silent as the 6 others were equally transfixed. After hearing this news, all were expressionless and made no sound. It was apparent that this letter had not stimulated any thoughts in them. Southern Lone Blade sighed and could only voice out, "This letter is a trap, but we can utilize it." The 6 stared soullessly at Southern Lone Blade. "The way I see it, they intend to lie to us, snatch back the utopian magic staff from us, and then finish us off, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, but we happen to be capable of turning this trap right back on them," Southern Lone Blade continued. There was still no response. He could not allow this indifference to carry on uninterrupted, so he swept his gaze across the 6 and asked, "Do you guys have something you wanna say?" "Big South, you're still not giving up?" Flame-cinched Clothes, who had been struck the heaviest out of them, spoke up first. "Give up? Do you guys wish to give up?" Southern Lone Blade returned his gaze to the others. None of them said a word, but he could read their expressions. They did not wish to give up, but they simply had no confidence and were reluctant to act. Actually, Southern Lone Blade was in the same boat as well. From the time he counted the magic staves to lull himself to sleep last night to the time he saw this letter, he was also in the same state of doubt, lacking any self-confidence. That was until his heart was reignited by this flame of hope in the form of the letter. "Even if we wish to give up, it's still not the end right now." Southern Lone Blade waved the letter to the 6. How would the letter affect anything? Sure enough, none of the 6 men had put any thought into the matter. "As I've said, they're looking to borrow our capabilities to obtain the magic staff, so they won't be giving us further trouble while we are still attempting to retrieve it. We should take advantage of this to see how things will pan out after we acquire the magic staff," Southern Lone Blade said. "Are you sure? Perhaps all they want is to make us reveal our whereabouts again." Blackwater took the letter from Southern Lone Blade in hopes of reading more to it, but was disappointed at what he saw. Southern Lone Blade had described a rather complex situation, but there were actually few words on the letter. "I'm offering twice the price. I want that magic staff." It was signed by Dancer. The letter was passed around to the others, And all of them shared the same sentiment. Being rich was wonderful. Just look at how imperious the tone of the letter was. Everybody could not help but think of how strenuous it was when doing business with Silver Moon, how every cent and aspect of the assignment had to be bargained before making a deal. In contrast, they did not have access to such an exceptional client like Svelte Dancer, yet it was for the fulfillment of Silver Moon's assignment that turned her into their enemy. Fate sure enjoyed making fools of men. What a lady! All of them sighed in awe. Most players would look down upon pay-to-win gamers, but Southern Lone Blade and his men were the sort that loved this particular crowd. Even if that's the case, we have yet to verify whether she really intends to hire us for our services or not. Glue reminded the others. Considering the conflicting positions they held with one another, they would be being far too witless if they believed this letter at face value, and that this would just be a simple transaction. Southern Lone Blade nodded in agreement. Which is why we still need to make the necessary preparations. With that, he turned to address Glue and Flame-Singed Clothes. It's my mistake yesterday. I should have taken precautions for the possibility for them to camp out the bounty assignment hall. After all, they also understand how the Windchaser's emblem work. Southern Lone Blade admitted his blunder in hopes of raising his men's morale by letting them know that the reason they had been beaten into a retreat was not because of their adversaries' formidability but, rather, because they had made a mistake. In other words, he implied that they would have succeeded had there not been such a gross oversight. That is why we should assign a lookout at the bounty assignment hall first, Southern Lone Blade said. I'll go. Blackwater volunteered. Given that Gouffé and Eternal Dominion had appeared in that place together, the bounty assignment hall would naturally be the most dangerous location. Thus, Blackwater, who possessed stealth, felt that he would be the most suitable. Glue sighed. Originally, he would be a very safe choice for this role since he had the ability to keep surveillance from a good distance to the target. Unfortunately, now that he was back to level 39, his eagle eye was gone, so he no longer had the ability to keep watch from afar. All right, you go. Southern Lone Blade approved. Blackwater nodded. Then, I'll be off. Take care. Everyone felt as if they were sending him off into a tiger's den, wishing the best for him as they watched him make his way down the corner of the street and disappear from sight. What are we gonna do over at the auction house? We still have no idea if anyone has retrieved the magic staff or otherwise, Glue said. You'll go to the auction house. Southern Lone Blade was looking at Patty Scent Pastures. Oh? Logically speaking, anyone should be able to keep watch of the auction house, yet Southern Lone Blade had singled out Patty Scent Pastures, as if there was a deeper meaning to it. Things are a little complicated over there. You might be unable to do it if you keep watch like how I and Cinch did it yesterday. Glue's heart trembled when he thought of the scene where the crowd surrounded them and the mad tongue lashing they got. Indeed, we won't be doing it like that. Southern Lone Blade nodded. He pulled out a scroll of paper and placed it on the table. Writing several words in bold letters and large font, he proceeded to take out a wooden board and extend a hand to Glue. Glue. I'm asking you to hand me some glue, Southern Lone Blade clarified. Glue wiped his sweat and pulled out a bottle of glue from his dimensional pocket and handed it over to him. Southern Lone Blade pasted the paper onto the wooden board to create a placard and then shoved it to Patty Scent Pasture's arms. Patty Scent Pastures hugged the placard as he sweated profusely. Must we do it like this? Written in large, bold letters were 7 words, looking to purchase the Utopian magic staff. Southern Lone Blade nodded. There shouldn't be anyone getting suspicious of you this way. Patty Scent Pastures finally understood why Southern Lone Blade had given him this task. A priest would be the most compatible with making a purchase of the magic staff, and while their team had 2 priests, the other priest Verdant Timber was an extremely honest person. He was the sort who would not even utter a word even when faced with a paddling. So this sort of situation where he must draw the public's attention would be a fate more painful than death. Southern Lone Blade and the others sometimes even wondered just why such an honest person would end up doing something so nefarious like larceny with them. Take the Windchaser's emblem and go pick up a bounty mission. We'll help you finish it before you go, Southern Lone Blade said. Got it. Patty Scent Pastures nodded. Any other questions? Southern Lone Blade asked. Can I cover my face? No. That will easily raise people's suspicion. Keeping his face covered would inevitably make people think that he was up to no good. Thus, from such incident, it could be said that keeping their faces uncovered was actually necessary, just like how Glue and Flame-Singed Close's faces were not covered last night. No other questions then. Patty St. Pastures was only thinking that he would look a little foolish with that placard raised, so he was reluctant to show his face around others out of embarrassment. You'll go alone to the auction house. As for the others, do the same as last night, keep an eye on the various spawn points and make sure that all your equipment is in order, Southern Lone Blade instructed. The other 4 men nodded. Then, let's help Patty St. Pastures do that bounty mission before we begin this operation, Southern Lone Blade announced. Patty St. Pastures sighed as he fitted the placard into his dimensional pocket. He took the Windchaser's emblem Glue had handed to him and equipped it, heading to the bounty assignment hall to pick up a bounty. Several hours later, a performance artist appeared in Beishi City's auction house. It was an expressionless priest who had a placard raised above his head that said, "Looking to purchase the Utopian magic staff."